In the very heart of the nine-word space, on an ancient pillar shrouded in mystical energy, a majestic presence was slowly awakening. As the view drew closer, the figure of a man became discernible. It was the Lord of Nine Words himself, the legendary Yuwan. After an infinitely long period of oblivion, the master finally opened his eyes, returning to consciousness. A sharp pain pierced the head of the awakened one. Reality turned out to be cruel. Dozens of thousands of years had passed since his imprisonment. Memories flooded in like a wave. Betrayal for power over the continent, a treacherous ambush involving hundreds of thousands of divine warriors, the destruction of his soul. However, thanks to the ancient technique, the soul gradually recovered. All vital knowledge was concentrated in the sacred mantra of 9 words. Alas, 8 of them have practically lost their power. Only in the syllable Lin did residual force smolder. Yuwan realized, to regain its former power and achieve revenge, it was necessary to first restore all 9 sacred words. By applying the space-splitting technique, the Overlord tore through the cosmic veil. The starry sky dissolved, revealing the ordinary earthly sky. Yuwan's gaze swept across the expanse, assessing the territory for the search for sacred words. Before him stretched a majestic mountain continent, the perfect place to start the path of recovery. The Lord knew, when the mantra gained its full power, his former might would return, and the time of reckoning with his enemies would come. Meanwhile, a fierce battle was unfolding near the majestic walls of the Thunderclaw clan. The battlefield was strewn with the bodies of fallen and severely wounded warriors. The enemy, contemplating the scene of destruction, merely sneered. The enemies had fallen into a trap. They had nowhere to run. Making his way through the fallen bodies, the invader headed towards the leader of the Thunderfist clan. The leader of the defenders, along with his closest associates, was in complete bewilderment. A man with whom they had never had any enmity had come here with the intention of exterminating their entire family. The clan leader sternly demanded an explanation, casting a gloomy glance at the ancestor of the bloody sword. The elder calmly explained to the leader of the doomed that the art of wielding a blade of their kind only invokes the heaven's wrath. It's no secret to anyone. At the same time, an excellent opportunity arose for the Bloodsword clan to enter the top 10 great families. For this reason, he could not miss such an opportunity, betraying his allies. Therefore, no one from the Thunderclaw clan should remain alive. The invader also tried to convince the enemy that the demise of their clan was ordained by the heavens themselves. Nevertheless, if the leader submits to fate, the elder may allow them to die with dignity. A similar proposal put the leader of the defenders out of temper. Thunderblade has bred heroes who know no fear on the battlefield, not cowards who tuck their tails. They will never surrender, and if they are fated to perish, they will first show the enemy the true wrath of their kind. After these fiery words, a colossal lightning discharge struck the leader's body, as if charging it with an unknown energy. Even the massive stone sword statues behind him began to sparkle with electrical discharges. Comrades understood. Their leader had taken the final form of the Thunderblade art. They believed, in such a state, he would inevitably crush any enemy. Even the Bloodblade's minions were frightened, watching as their opponent managed to complete such a powerful transformation despite their severe injuries. Fortunately, their lord calmed the subordinates, suggesting they take a closer look at the fighter's condition. This form was depleting his life force too rapidly. The warrior could barely stand on his feet. Even the head's son, seeing his father's suffering, begged him not to drive himself to such a state. Nevertheless, the man was confident in his ability to withstand the test. After that, he unleashed the Storm Strike technique on the enemy. The opponent watched in horror as a powerful lightning bolt shot towards his body. He couldn't believe that the chief had actually managed to summon a real storm. So, despite his critical condition, the warrior had completed his transformation. However, immediately after the attack, blood gushed from the head's mouth in a stream. Consciousness was leaving him, and the leader collapsed onto the cold ground. As he failed to maintain control, the summoned storm immediately dissipated, never hitting its target. The warrior was still trying to come to his senses after such a strong shock. It has now become obvious. The head has suffered a defeat. The opponent was slowly approaching, licking the blood from the blade, promising to see it through to the end. At this critical moment, the loyal warriors stood up to defend their leader and the young lord, intending to detain the captor, to give them a chance to escape. The chief, barely coming to his senses, couldn't reconcile himself to the thought that the clan he had built with such difficulty would be destroyed. Suddenly, everyone in the sky saw thunder and lightning that did not disperse. Then the electric discharge shot straight at their enemies. The enemy's body was struck and then incinerated in full view of all present. The son of the leader could rejoice. His father's equipment had finally worked. Rescue had arrived. The minions, however, did not know what to do after the death of their lord. However, in the next second, they noticed a human silhouette in the midst of the explosion from the lightning strike. When the smoke had finally cleared, everyone realized there was a live person standing there. The stranger was not disturbed at all that he had just killed an opponent. On the contrary, he merely thanked the cushion of human flesh for breaking his fall. The frightened son of the head of the Thunderclaw clan wanted to understand who his father had summoned. The man was perfectly aware. Heavenly thunder shows no mercy, destroying everything in its path. Ordinary people have absolutely no chance of survival in such an element. Therefore, only one conclusion remained. Before them was an all-powerful deity. The son found it incredible. For thousands of years had passed since anyone in these lands had encountered the all-powerful gods. Powerful were able to communicate with the heavens without fearing thunder. Therefore, the young man hoped the deity would help their clan, and then they would have a chance for salvation. At this time, Yuwan was gazing at the burning glyph in his palm. Initially, it was formed by absorbing all sorts of techniques from around the world. Now, in order to heal, he had to reassemble tens of thousands of different martial arts. The Lord considered this small world perfectly suitable for starting his path of restoration. When the stranger turned to the people, he saw that they had all fallen to their knees before him. The clan leader told that their family had been attacked, so they were begging for help. The defenders promised to give everything the savior required, ready to pay any price if the Lord would help destroy the Bloodsword clan. After all, he came here not at all to provide assistance. Meanwhile, the seemingly defeated enemy had finally come to their senses. The captor was astonished that the head of the Thunderblade had managed to find such a powerful ally, handedly opposed dozens of his followers. After that, the elder turned to the disciples of the Bloodsword clan, ordering them to apply the blood-shedding Heaven Gate technique. At once, all the true followers raised their hands to the sky, allowing the blood to slowly seep out of their own bodies. The red liquid formed into a giant stream resembling the skull of a wild beast. Even the clan leader was frightened upon seeing this technique. There were rumors that with its help, the Bloodsword clan had once defeated the Omnipotent itself. They said it was the limit of the possibilities for any Almighty, the strongest technique of a given clan. Nevertheless, Yuwan was not going to interfere in their disputes, since other people's martial arts were not of interest to him. The old man was clearly grieved that the stranger was responding in a similar manner, as if he didn't consider them worthy opponents. To avenge the neglect, he ordered his disciples to attack that particular person. As a result, the Lord became a witness to a stream of blood rushing towards him. It was only natural that he was annoyed. He had just descended into the human world, and these simpletons were already asking for a fight. Yuwan asked them not to be surprised by the outcome afterwards. Observing the rash decision of the mysterious warrior, the opponents merely laughed, imagining what would happen when he tried to touch this blood with his bare hands. Even the leader of the Thunderblade clan realized his mistake, considering the stranger their savior. Apparently, even the all-powerful cannot withstand such a technique, although he behaves as if he is not afraid of death. At last, the bloody stream burst upon its target, striking straight into the ground. The elder laughed, realizing that even the Almighty, struck by their technique, had turned to pitiful ashes. He once again declared that the Thunderblade clan would be destroyed today, and no one would be able to stand in their way. However, to his greatest astonishment after the attack, the old man saw the man unharmed. Even the clan leader and his son found it hard to believe what was happening. Yuwan calmly walked closer to the elderly captive. Was he really going to kill him with such a pathetic technique? After these words, the master slightly clenched his fingers, and the bloody technique began to crumble in his hands, like fragile clay. Yuwan decided to demonstrate to his opponents the true power capable of sowing death. The old man simply gaped in astonishment, refusing to believe that the stranger had managed to deflect their strongest attack with just his fingers. As the mysterious warrior drew near, the leader of the invader's body began to tremble more and more violently. In his head there was only one tormenting question: who was this man? Nevertheless, Yuwan did not introduce himself, only stating that he was the one who would take the old man's vile life. The elderly warrior smiled foolishly, frantically trying to come up with some kind of excuse. However, the master did not hesitate, instantly striking the impudent one right on the jaw. The opponent flew back a considerable distance, shocking his followers. Yuwan made it clear that his apologies were of no interest to him. After the old man crashed into the wall, his subordinates were horrified. They couldn't believe that one blow could have nearly killed their leader. Moreover, considering that the bloodblade technique had no effect on Yuwan, they were finally convinced They were facing an all-powerful being. When the stranger turned his gaze on these small birds, they literally trembled with horror. The Lord made it clear. If they didn't leave right now, he would make sure they would never be able to walk again. Obviously frightened and almost in tears, the attackers rushed to run in an unknown direction. The defenders of the Thunderfist clan couldn't believe that their enemies had retreated so swiftly and shamefully. But everyone was sincerely rejoicing. The Bloodsword clan had escaped, which meant they had survived thanks to the noble lord. The son of the head also rejoiced along with the others, considering the catastrophe to have been prevented. However, his father understood that it was too early to claim that their troubles were over. After this battle, their disciples suffered heavy losses. Many were killed or seriously injured. The head himself was also seriously injured. If another enemy invasion occurs in the future, they will not have the strength to resist. For this reason, the man focused all his attention on the unexpectedly appeared savior. The leader understood. This person was their only chance of survival. Meanwhile, Yuwan was pondering how to study the techniques for fully restoring the Lin word. Since he was unfamiliar with this world, the Lord had no idea where to go for martial arts. At this moment, the head of the Thunderclaw clan called out to the Lord. Turning around, he saw that all the warriors had lined up around him with extremely serious faces. In Yuwan's eyes, curious sparks danced. He thought that they too wanted to fight him. However, instead of a challenge, each of the fighters kneeled down. The chief explained that the Thunderfist clan wishes to serve him as a lord, begging him to become the new master of their kin. Such a proposal was clearly not part of the hero's plans. Only 10 minutes had passed since he returned from oblivion. Naturally, Yuwan decided to find out why these people were asking him to become their leader. The chief explained. It was only thanks to Yuwan's intervention that the leader of the Bloodsword was defeated and their clan was saved. They had no way to repay such great kindness except to respect him as a master. In this way, they could express their gratitude. The Guardians also believed that under his guidance, the Thunderfist clan would be able to revive and take its honorable place among the top 10 powers. The Lord quickly grasped the true intentions. In other words, they want to tie their family to him, hoping that their enemies will no longer dare to attack them. The boss felt extremely embarrassed that Yuwan had figured them out so easily. Already preparing to resort to a backup plan, the leader made it clear to the stranger that his military exploits had already spread far beyond these lands, so no villain would dare disturb him. Then the man said that their clan is among the top 10 families, where there are many resources, elixirs, spiritual stones. In the southern region, they have a certain influence, so Yuwan will gain a lot from such an alliance. They are ready to fulfill any of his requests if he agrees to become their master. Nevertheless, the hero made it clear that he was not interested in such speeches at all. The only thing that attracted the Lord was the techniques practiced by their clan. Upon hearing this, the leader honestly admitted, they only have one high-level secret technique. The rest of the martial arts are quite weak and not worthy of the master's attention. Given the formidable power he has demonstrated, Thunderclaw's techniques are unlikely to interest him. Yuwan understood. These people really had nothing to offer. Even the clan leader himself explained that their affairs were going poorly. They occupied only the last place among the top 10 leading clans. The strongest techniques are mainly renowned by the Heavenly Dao clan, which ranks first among the 10 main clans. The clan has a vast array of martial arts, but unfortunately, they are not of a high enough level and are unlikely to interest the Lord. However, Yuwan was intrigued by the fact that they really had a lot of techniques. The main hall stored more than 60,000 books. The library had over 30,000 volumes. The Elder's house had more than 10,000 scrolls, plus around 112,000 other records. The Lord did not expect that such a small clan in this world would have so many technicians. Moreover, the clan leader was even willing to acquire martial arts from others if necessary for Yuwan, even if it meant selling the clan's property. Anyway, even if not all the techniques suited him, more than 100,000 different martial arts would have been enough to restore a part of Lin's strength. The boss was perplexed that the hero had a particular fondness for weak techniques. Apparently, all the powerful people in this world have their own quirks. However, this was irrelevant, given that they would now be under protection. At this moment, the Lord, putting his hand on the head's shoulder, explained that he accepts their offer and becomes the master of the Thunderblade clan. At the same time, a red lightning flashed across the clear sky. Everyone turned around, for they knew this was a person flying as fast as an all-powerful deity. He was also the strongest cultivator in the northern region. By rumor, it was a bloodthirsty personality who often cut down entire cities and destroyed villages. Such was a righteous man named Min Sha. Everyone saw that he was heading towards the Thunderfist. so the other masters decided to clear out and avoid catching his eye unnecessarily. Meanwhile, on the territory of the Thunderclaw clan, the training of young warriors continued. After the horrific incident with the blood sword, the students' cohesion increased significantly. Since they remained loyal to the clan, the training became much more intense than before. The boss believed that all this was due to the merit of their new master Yuwan. Without him, they would not have survived to this moment. Everyone was rejoicing, understanding that in the future, no one would dare to disturb their clan and lord. However, a man suddenly landed right on the training ground, ordering the little men of Thunderblade to prepare for death. The clan leader and his son stood frozen in bewilderment, not understanding who had come to visit them. This is the very righteous Minsha. They were curious to know the reason for his visit, since nothing had previously connected them to this person. Nevertheless, the paladin explained that he had arrived in search of a murderer who was hiding in the Thunderfist clan. But since searching for one single person was too exhausting, he decided not to bother himself with the search and kill everyone at once. The clan leader was shocked. How many troubles had befallen them? Only yesterday, they were attacked by the blood sword, and now this righteous one too. The defenders couldn't believe that Minsha really wanted to exterminate them. Neutral observers understood. The clan was extremely unlucky, as the blood sword had already weakened them. The frightened son asked his father to call for their master Yuwan's help as soon as possible. Minsha is at the third stage of the Yang realm and is the strongest creature in the northern region. Although Yuwan is also in the Yang realm, he is not a match for the righteous one, and will not be able to protect their savior. The son apparently did not understand what to do then. But the father realized the demise of their clan was simply inevitable. The leader decided to detain the righteous man and asked his son to immediately inform Lord Yuwan so that he could escape. In this case, perhaps the stranger could save their disciples. After that, the head chased his son away, making it clear that he wouldn't be able to hold off the enemy for much longer. Minsha seemed to have read their intentions and made it clear that none of them would be able to escape. Then the righteous one attacked with his trident, putting inner energy into the strike. The observers understood. It would take at least 3 people to block a similar attack. Everyone realized how powerful this righteous man was. However, at that very moment, Yuwan intervened in the battle, who was irritated by the buzzing flies that disturbed his rest. The Lord with his divine palm struck the impudent one. In an instant, the opponent's body was crushed by the pressure and pressed into the solid earth. This attack was made from a secluded place where the hero focused on studying books. At last, after he had overcome this opponent, a silence ensued that allowed him to continue reading. The other observers were in shock, unable to understand what was happening. How could the strongest cultivator of the third stage die so easily? The head of the clan, however, looked towards the library with gratitude, where the Lord had secluded himself at that time, once again saving their family. The leader made it clear to his son, when Yuwan comes out of seclusion, they should do their best to satisfy any of his needs. The young man couldn't believe how great their master was, who had defeated a righteous man with a single move. Everyone wholeheartedly respected and worshipped such a powerful person. However, during their conversation, a dear gentleman unexpectedly appeared from the library. That's why the defenders immediately began to ask how his classes went. His lordship, merely rubbing his temples, explained that it had taken him 2 full days to finally read all the literature. At first, the head of the family and his son were surprised by his love of reading. But then they realized he had studied hundreds of thousands of books on techniques in their library in just 2 days. Nevertheless, the hero made it clear that his divine consciousness had been seriously damaged. For the time being, he had only used a tiny part of his power. Otherwise, he would have read all the books instantly. That's why Yuwan was annoyed. Time had been wasted. The Lord presumed that the gentleman was at the pinnacle of the Yang realm. However, this level had been surpassed by the Lord long ago. Hearing this, the leader of the Thunderblade clan and his son couldn't believe it. What level was their master at? Yuwan also made it clear that it was time for him to leave, thanking the clan members for their hospitality. Looking at the astonished faces of the head and his son, he explained. He had stayed here only because it was necessary to study all the techniques. Now that the reading was complete, he had to move on. His tone made the air seem to thicken. Initially, the leader had thought that studying hundreds of thousands of books would allow Yuwan to stay in their clan for a few years. He never expected it to take only 2 days. The Lord asked the head not to even think about detaining him. He needs a place where he can study an even greater number of techniques. Suddenly, an idea about a place where there were even more martial arts came into the leader's head. The man immediately made a proposal, telling that their clan has permission to use a place with a huge number of techniques. If Ye decides to stay in the Thunderblade clan, then the clan leader will help him get in. Similar information interested the Lord, and the leader told about the Vandao Academy. Meanwhile, the events moved to the Rising Cloud clan. The chief was reported a stunning news. The righteous Minsha was killed with one attack. Although it seemed impossible, his son had seen with his own eyes how a man named Ye had slain the ancestor of the Blood Sword. Naturally, the leader wanted to know where the Thunderfist clan had found such a powerful ally, capable of destroying a third-stage Yang Realm cultivator with a single move. The man realized he couldn't come to terms with this and had to meet this person immediately. The son tried to explain that Ye was unavailable. According to reliable sources, he is in the Wandao Academy at the recommendation of the Thunderblade clan. Then it became obvious to the head that their secret, that they themselves were the puppeteers wishing for the downfall of their enemies, was still hidden. They still need to find a way to get rid of this Ye as soon as possible, or else they will never be able to destroy the Thunderblade clan and complete the Cloud Ascension clan's century-long plan. The son tried to object that the Wandao Academy was beyond the influence of the families and the 10 main clans. They had no right to interfere. However, such uncertainty of his own heir only amused the father. The leader made it clear. Over the years, their clan had already recommended many students to the academy. Although most of them are worthless, there are also strong individuals who have grown into outstanding students of the academy. The son understood. His father meant the senior disciple and wanted to send him to fight with this very Yi Xuan. The head, however, knew perfectly well how arrogant and vain their graduate was. If he told him that Ye was known as the first genius of the northern region, he would naturally help him. At the same time, events moved to the Vandao Academy itself. There arrived a multitude of students, rejoicing at the opportunity to get into such a prestigious institution. Many wanted to make a breakthrough in the academy and justify the expectations of their fathers. The hero himself was carefully examining the inscription 10,000 Paths carved into the stone at that time. He understood that the academy must have some hidden meaning and hoped that the number of books in it would not disappoint him. However, a sudden explosion occurred right on the steps when ascending to the academy. From this explosion emerged a student who introduced himself as the class leader of the Vandao Academy's combat class, named Lin Kun. He also asked the other students to call him senior student. He was in charge of welcoming newcomers to the academy. Everyone bowed politely at once, greeting the young man. But unexpectedly, a young lady began to descend the stairs behind him. This pink-haired beauty was called Chayu. Everyone's mouth dropped open in amazement, admiring such an unparalleled girl. Even the hero smiled faintly, acknowledging her beauty to be quite outstanding. Lin Kun calmly inquired of an acquaintance why she had come. After all, today was the solemn ceremony of accepting new students. The girl explained that she had come in place of the teacher to see if there were any good seedlings here that could sprout in their academy. But Lin Kun didn't want the beauty to waste her efforts. Even if good candidates were found, they would still join the combat class. No one would choose her useless crafting class. After that, he loudly announced to the freshmen to follow him. It was time to start the grand opening ceremony. Ye listened carefully to all the mentioned classes, hoping that the academy had other majors that would allow him to study as much literature as possible. Following the senior disciple Lin Kun, they stopped at the foot of a magnificent statue of a young scholar. It was the founder of their Vandao Academy, Mr. Li Qingfen. The Lord merely smiled. He had no idea that the academy had been founded by his old friend. According to recollections, he really loved reading books. But now, having created the academy, he has certainly not forgotten about his initial goals. At the same time, Lin Kun made it clear. Before bowing to the founder, anyone with ill intentions towards their academy should leave immediately. Otherwise, they will find out what it ends with. The student's glance suggested nothing good. The students thought it was foolish to determine someone's evil intentions if the person did not admit to them himself. Nevertheless, no one wanted to argue with the senior student. Everyone bowed and respectfully greeted the founder. Right there, a golden mist appeared around the statue, dancing around the book in the hands of the monument. All this gold began to envelop the nearby students. But some of them were thrown away with such force that they immediately got internal and external damage. The rest of the students exchanged bewildered glances, not understanding what was happening. It turned out that these two were pretending. In fact, they were demons. Everyone was in shock, realizing that the evil had been hiding among them all this time. The Lord was astonished. He did not expect that his old friend would be able to create such a powerful spell. It was the great spirit of justice technique, imparting a blessing. Lin Kun explained the covenant left by the founder. Any evil creatures with malicious intentions towards the academy would be transformed into their true form. After that, the elder summoned the guard, ordering them to take the unclean one to court for sentencing. Watching the demons being taken away, the students experienced real horror. They decided from then on to never speak ill of the academy again, fearing that something similar would happen to them. At this moment, Lin Kun paid close attention to the hero. He was curious as to why he was the only one who didn't bow, as the others had done. The elder reminded that anyone not showing due respect to the founder is equated with those two demons. In the end, since Xuan had no choice, he still had to bow down to avoid more trouble. However, at the same moment after his bow, the sky was covered with storm clouds. One of the lightning bolts immediately struck the statue of the founder. After a direct hit, the statue split exactly in half. At the same time, in a very distant and gloomy place, a battle unfolded between a dragon and a deity named Li Qingfen. At this critical moment, the founder began to cast a spell so as not to let the monster escape. However, suddenly in the distance he heard and felt a burst of thunder. The deity was distracted, sensing a familiar aura. In this second, the dragon tried to slip away. Li Qingfen realized he wasn't wrong. It was a very familiar energy, belonging to his friend who had returned from oblivion. Meanwhile, the newcomers to the academy whispered to each other in puzzlement, wondering why the statue of the founder had cracked. They blamed Xuan, who had allegedly bowed incorrectly, although it seemed quite strange, given that he was recommended by the Thunder Fist clan. Among the leading families, they occupy the last place. It is unlikely that they will have such a powerful follower. The senior disciple understood. Perhaps the one in front of him was that very Xuan that the clan leader had told him about. Although Lin Kun had no idea how this guy had broken the statue of the founder, he could use the incident as a pretext to openly kill him. After all, he couldn't let this young man take the place of the strongest cultivator in the northern region. Approaching closer, the elder challenged the young man, inquiring how he dared to harm the statue of the founder. Xuan calmly reminded that he had simply bowed as required and didn't understand what Lin Kun didn't like. But Tuo was greatly angered by Xuan daring to speak so disdainfully of their founder. Because the stranger had destroyed the statue and was now showing disrespect, the elder was convinced. This guy was a spy sent by the demon clan. That's why he demanded confession of sins. Naturally, the Lord understood that the destruction of the statue was indeed connected to him. But for some reason, it seemed to him that this young man was intentionally looking for a reason to fight. Not hearing a clear response, Lin Kun considered the hero's silence as extra proof of the correctness of his words. Therefore, he attacked the guy, intending to cut off his demonic wings and bring him to trial. The Lord calmly watched the attack rushing towards him, wondering what these troubles were for. After all, he had come only to read books. However, someone's hand unexpectedly rose to his defense. After the collision of the two forces, the remaining newcomers were even thrown back by the power of the blow. Xuan looked at the one who had stood up for him with curiosity. It was the young lady on Yue who asked Lin Kun to stop, thinking that they did not have enough grounds to punish the newcomer. The elder tried to explain that the matter concerned the demon clan's spies, and there was no place for fragile women here, and ordered the beauty to step aside. However, the girl still couldn't let him do as he pleased. After all, if he mistakenly killed an innocent person, how would they justify themselves to the Thunderclaw clan? These words only elicited a scornful laugh from Lin Kun. He believed that they didn't have to report to the weaker clans, and he was even ready to take Anchayu's life if she didn't stop interfering with him. In fact, the guy planned to first humiliate the girl and then make her his plaything, thus achieving two goals at once. As if she had heard his thoughts, Anchayue became enraged, and Xuan calmly thanked the senior disciple for her intervention, but decided to continue the duel on his own. The girl tried to explain to the younger student that this was not the time for heroics. Meanwhile, Lin Kun just sneered at the hero, not understanding whether he was a brave man or a fool. After these words, an aura spread around the elder. He understood. Xuan would not be able to withstand a duel with him for anything. Even the novices saw that the guy had activated the 5th stage of the Yang realm. They thought Xuan had completely gone mad, intending to confront a master of the 5th stage. The Lord seemed to be even slightly surprised to see the power of the 5th stage, and Lin Kun believed that the opponent would surely tremble before his might. Attacking, the elder warned that he would not let his opponent go, allowing everyone to feel with every fiber of their soul the terrifying power of the 5th stage of the Yang realm. Frightened, Anchayue screamed, ordering the hero to dodge immediately. How truly pathetic the 5th stage actually was. With just 2 fingers, he smashed the enemy's weapon to smithereens. His mouth even dropped open in amazement from a similar shock. Right after that, Lin Kun barely managed to notice the approaching strike, but he didn't manage to dodge. That's why he tumbled and flew to the nearest obstacle, against which his body stopped. The novices were shocked, their mouths agape, unable to comprehend how a single move could send a senior disciple flying. If he couldn't withstand the attack of a 5th stage master, then Yeshuan was even stronger. It seems that even Aniclimax did not expect such an outcome from the junior student. The Lord, however, was slightly disappointed. For even after this light slap, Lin's power of words, which was already small, had been used up again. He decided to immediately make up for the losses at the academy. But to his surprise, at that moment the senior student came to consciousness. Lin Kun understood. Of the 10 great clans in the northern region, the strongest were only at the 4th level of the Yang realm. So Yeshuan was definitely a person from a demonic clan, and his teacher would definitely execute him. At this moment, the head of the academy himself appeared, for he had seen the destroyed statue of the great founder. Looking at the students, he wanted to know what had happened and who had dared to commit such a sacrilege. And Qiuyue panicked. She hadn't expected this incident to disturb their normally unflappable mentor. Lin Kun immediately flew to the teacher and reported, Yeshuan not only destroyed the statue of the Lord Founder, but also beat him. The elder was completely convinced. This guy was a spy sent by the demon clan, and asked to put the arrogant man in his place. And Qiuyue immediately spoke up for Yeshuan, thinking that the situation was not as the hothead described. However, the boss decided to get to the bottom of things personally. The senior disciple merely sneered at the beauty, understanding that she would never be able to protect this scoundrel. For the headmaster holds the Lord Founder in higher esteem than anyone else, and regardless of whether the boy is a spy for the demon clan or not, he will die anyway. When the leader approached and began to interrogate, Yeshuan honestly admitted that the destruction of the statue might have something to do with him. But he was definitely not a demonic spy. The head didn't care if he was a spy or not. The stranger had dared to show disrespect and destroy the statue of the great founder. Anyone who committed such sacrilege had to pay the price. Unfortunately, the master realized, after this clash, the road to the academy was closed for him. Observing the possible confrontation, Lin Kun was overjoyed in his heart. For as soon as the teacher flattens Yeshuan, he will become the first cultivator of the northern region. However, unexpectedly in the midst of the intense confrontation, a message rushed to them, swift as an arrow. The plaque instantly fell right into the hands of the head of the academy. On the plate was an order from the founder himself. The message was probably about something serious. Perhaps waves of wild beasts, a demon clan invasion, or interclan wars. Nevertheless, the founder clearly showed the manager the portrait of the hero, warning, no one should interfere with this person doing what he wishes. Li Qingfen gave a personal order to the head of the academy to take care of this guy. The tension reached its peak, and Qiuyue noticed that Master Lin's face had clearly darkened. Lin Kun was overjoyed, understanding that no matter what news the leader received, Yeshuan would definitely die today. The Lord, however, was aware that this would not happen. Although the head of the academy was powerful, in the end, with the help of Lin's word, he would be able to overcome him. It was naturally frustrating that he couldn't get into the academy through peaceful means, and that he would have to spend the remaining mantra's power. For him, this was a significant loss. The moment of truth had arrived. As the leader turned his attention to Yeshuan, Qiuyue held her breath in horror. Lin Kun waited triumphantly for punishment, but to everyone's amazement, the boss merely patted the young man on the back in approval. He asked the young man not to worry about anything and to introduce himself. The senior disciple couldn't understand why the master had forgiven him. It seemed as though the stranger didn't respect their founder at all. After all, Yeshuan had destroyed the statue, a crime worthy of execution. But instead of punishment, the leader was interested in his name. And Qiuyue was certain. The head of the academy was too wise and perceptive not to understand. Yeshuan was not guilty of anything. The atmosphere changed drastically. The leader was still smiling as he questioned the hero, asking him to name his name. Then he asked the Lord not to worry. He knew that the statue of the great founder needed restoration anyway. It has nothing to do with Yi Xuan. And the hero was curious about where the murderous intention of the head had suddenly disappeared to. But at this moment, a stubborn senior fellow intervened in the conversation. Lin Kun explained to the head that he was wrong. The statue of the Lord Founder, which contained the sacred mantra, could not just crack like that. He was sure. Yeshuan was definitely involved in what had happened. The anger came down like an avalanche. It seems the head of the academy did not like Lin Kun's words at all. He instantly spread a deadly aura, thinking that the disciple had dared to question his words. Everyone around felt a storm of rage that made it hard to breathe. Even Lin Kun couldn't withstand the pressure. He fell to his knees, begging the Lord for forgiveness. The rest of the students couldn't breathe properly, unable to believe that the leader was so powerful. He had forced the strongest of the students to kneel. The leader repeated to the foolish student, "The incident with the statue has nothing to do with Yuwan. It's an accident that Lin Kun should not interfere with." The storm subsided as suddenly as it had begun. The headmaster calmly turned to the Lord, with a smile explaining that the incident with the statue was over. He asked the young man not to leave their academy because of this misunderstanding. After that, the leader, as if nothing had happened, withdrew, asking the students to continue the opening ceremony. Off to the side, by a ruined statue, a man was deep in thought. He didn't understand why the founder attached such importance to Yuwan. But since he had taken up the post, the founder had contacted him for the first time. Therefore, the head decided to follow the orders and take care of this young man. The Lord also quickly understood the reason for such a sharp change in attitude towards the head. Meanwhile, the students were in a state of bewilderment. Lin Kun was indignant, unable to understand why the head was being so lenient with the newcomer. Perhaps he had recognized his talent, but it was Lin Kun who was considered the first genius of the northern region. The other students whispered to each other, understanding that Yuwan was incredibly lucky that the headmaster had acknowledged his innocence. After all, an ordinary mortal could not possibly destroy a statue of the founder that contained a magical mantra. The irritation of the senior student reached its limit. These words further enraged Lin Kun. He ordered the newcomers to shut up. After all, they hadn't passed the final test yet. As is known, the academy is not in vain called the Academy of 10,000 Ways. This means everyone who comes here will definitely find their own way. The moment of truth had arrived. The elder applied force, summoning a multitude of scrolls. These scrolls represented the true treasure left by the great founder. Only a person with a pure and firm soul is able to grasp their contents in half an hour. Disciples who have managed to realize the scrolls can choose a class on their own. The rest will be sent to a distant mountain, to the Garden of Spiritual Medicine, for a month of labor before they become full-fledged students. Lin Kun announced the start of the trial, and the scrolls rushed to the students. Fear gripped the newcomers. Many were frightened. Among them were even the masters of the Yang realm, who did not realize that they would have to work for a whole month if they failed the trial. The rest, filled with anxiety, still hoped to understand what was written in the scrolls. Lin Kun was triumphant as an examiner, realizing he had framed Yuwan and would prove his point to the chief. The elder specially prepared a trap, being confident that his opponent would not understand the contents and would remain embarrassingly red-faced. The test had begun. The students one by one started to unroll the scrolls. Most of them didn't understand what was written at all. Some radiated relief, realizing at least a small part of the contents, and Yue was amazed to see the records of the Divine Mountain in the hero's hands. This infuriated her. It was known that no one could decipher those records, and Lin Kun just handed them over to Yuwan. Obviously, he won't be able to understand those writings either. Nevertheless, the elder only asked the girl to watch her language in the presence of her elders, making it clear that all the scrolls are distributed randomly, and Yuwan was just unlucky. He confidently stated that he had nothing to do with it. Although An Ziying was indignant, she could do nothing. The mere thought of the hero having a tough time made her sad. But the master had a surprise in store. Yuwan, examining the hieroglyphs, quickly realized it was his own work. At this moment, the guy suddenly felt the approach of several figures to the statue of the head. These were senior students who had arrived to take the exam. They wanted to arrive on time to see if there were any real talents among this gathering. Attention was focused on one. The headmaster was also watching the test, as a genius had already been found among the students. The senior student didn't know if there were any gifted individuals here, but she noticed one unfortunate and pointed to the hero holding the most complex scroll. The reason for his misfortune is that the scroll was created by the great founder himself. This guy is definitely doomed to work as a laborer for a whole month. The leader perfectly understood. Lin Kun had completely lost his mind, determined to take revenge right before his eyes. The leader would definitely teach the insolent man a lesson as soon as the trial was over. But still, the head was interested to see what was special about the young man, whom their founder had noticed. He hoped the young man would be able to perform a miracle. But at this moment, the hero suddenly raised his hand, asking for another scroll, for he did not want to read this one aloud. Even the head of the academy did not know how to react. He had wanted to exclaim that he had expected a lot from the hero, but it turned out to be an ungrateful young whippersnapper. But he didn't have time to say anything, as Lin Kun called it impudence, reminding him, Yuwan is not at home to demand whatever he wants. Besides, replacing the scroll would be unfair to the others. Everyone gets a scroll randomly. Since the Lord got this one, it's just bad luck, and the others are not to blame. Therefore, if he doesn't read the scroll, he will automatically be sent to labor. Even the chief, though he understood the complexity of the scroll, was disappointed. The young man did not even want to try to understand it. But the Lord was hiding his true emotions. It seemed that Yuwan was not disturbed at all by the refusal to replace the scroll. In fact, he simply never expected to encounter plagiarism of his own work. For now, the hero has decided not to rush and not to read out what he understood, fearing to influence the other students. Meanwhile, the malice had reached its peak. Lin Kun was gloating, anticipating. Today, Yuwan would be humiliated, and the founder would realize his mistake. The boss, the hero, should have insisted on his own way, rather than retreating after the first refusal. That's why the leader was perplexed. Why did the founder like this indecisive young man so much? But the pink-haired beauty guessed that perhaps the Lord wanted to change the scroll for some other reason, not considering it too complicated. The hourglass was relentlessly counting down the time. 30 minutes had passed, and the moment of reckoning had arrived. Soon, those who had fully comprehended the scrolls began to emit a golden glow. The senior students were amazed. Half an hour is far from a record, but the result is quite good. The Lord, however, was clearly bored, not wanting to be among the first, and so he decided to wait a little longer. The hero waited another 15 minutes. Soon the scrolls of several people flashed with gold, and they joyfully bid farewell to free works. The senior students were impressed. This year some quite decent freshmen had enrolled. Some of them seemed perfectly suited for martial arts right from the start. And the master continued to wait, seeing no sense in hurrying. After another full 25 minutes, when all the gifted students had completed the exam, the senior students decided to leave. Yuwan was still dozing over the scroll, not having read it all the way through. The fateful hour was approaching. Then Lin Kun loudly announced, only a couple of minutes were left until the end. The disciples who had not achieved enlightenment would be sent to work for a month. Those who had failed to grasp the scrolls were beside themselves with grief. They wondered, why had the scriptures deemed their souls not pure enough? Although they had never succumbed to temptations, malice filled the elder's heart. Lin Kun sneered at the hero's complete failure, considering it a fitting punishment for the audacity to raise a hand against him. Even the head did not understand what else to expect from the young man. He did not have a strong heart to overcome difficulties, and would not be able to read the scroll. Leaving, the leader reconciled himself. This time the gentleman founder had indeed made a mistake. Victory seemed inevitable. Lin Kun clearly noticed how the chief shook his head and sighed. He was genuinely disappointed in Yuwan. But that was not enough for the elder. Later, he planned to humiliate the hero in front of everyone, so that the hatred in his heart could finally subside. Even Aniclimax couldn't believe that the guy wouldn't read the scroll. It was obvious. He had given up from the very beginning. The countdown from 5 to 1 to the end of the exam began soon. And in the last moment, the hero finally decided to realize this scroll. A real hurricane of energy danced around the Lord, witnessed by all those present. Hieroglyphs from the scrolls, of both those who failed the test and those who passed it successfully, began to peel off the parchments. All writing slowly converged on the hero himself. The unthinkable has become a reality. Everyone's mouths were agape with amazement, refusing to believe what was happening. Yuwan managed to attract all the scrolls at the same time in just 1 second. Lin Kun clearly did not understand how this was possible. After all, he had definitely given the hero the most complicated records, which were impossible to fully comprehend. And Yuwan was delighted. She hadn't been wrong about Yuwan. He hadn't given up at the very beginning, as everyone had expected. Even the senior students were perplexed. Why had all the writings turned to him? Despite having achieved enlightenment, they remembered an incident where one of their predecessors had repeated something similar when entering the academy. But back then, only one scroll had responded to him, and this guy had managed to comprehend all the records simultaneously. Everyone was wondering how thorny his fate was, that he attracted all the scrolls at once. The headman blamed himself, apologizing to the founder for his eyes having failed him. He turned out to be a donkey deserving of punishment. The manager realized the founder was not mistaken. This guy was really talented. Therefore, he began to mentally apologize to the gentleman for his terrible doubts. The master, however, understood that although the scrolls gathered here were not strong enough, they would suffice for his Tao stream. That's why he decided to wait for the end of the trial, in order to absorb the energy of all the participants' scrolls. The more parchments surrounded it, the more dazzling the glow became. Thus, the hero fully accepted the gifts left to him by that boy he had met tens of thousands of years ago. With a smile, Yuwan promised he would not be in debt. With the help of all these scrolls, he was finally able to restore one of the 9 words of his power. These hieroglyphs were visible to everyone, however much those present scrutinized them. No one could grasp their true meaning. Even the head of the academy did not understand the meaning of these symbols. But it became obvious. Yuwan has a great origin. Even the leader did not have the right to argue with such a person. The master examined the word Lin. Finally, after devouring all the scrolls, its fading power was restored by half. But the venom of stubbornness did not retreat. Lin Kun did not give up again, accusing Yuwan of blasphemy. He dared to destroy all the precious scrolls of the great founder. Lin Kun wanted to get rid of the hero at all costs. After all, only he could be the first genius of the northern region. Even the master himself was embarrassed. He had not expected to completely destroy all the scrolls. All that was left was to hope that the founder would not be too enraged. NQUA once again tried to plead on Yuwan's behalf. It was clear that he had done it unintentionally and sincerely regretted it. But obsession knows no mercy. Lin Kun didn't care about that at all. The only fact that remained was that the scrolls had been completely destroyed by the hero. That's why the elder immediately turned to the head, reminding him. All these writings were left by the great founder and were treasures. When he returns, he will definitely notice the loss. Then a heavy responsibility will fall on everyone. He demanded that the culprit be punished. Patience snapped like an overstrained string. Instead of an answer, Lin Kun received a ringing slap from the head, who could no longer endure the constant wailing. For the second time that day, the senior student was pitifully defeated in front of everyone. The leader was extremely angry. The student dared to argue with him and teach him what to do. Even the other senior students did not stand up for their colleague, understanding that the head was strict but fair. As soon as Lin Kun somewhat came to after another blow, he looked at the leader with pleading eyes, not understanding what he had done wrong. The man angrily ordered the boy to get out of his sight. In fact, the leader understood. He shouldn't have allowed Lin Kun to test Yuwan. Now he was worried about the founder's anger. But immediately after these thoughts, the leader saw a message hurrying to him from the Lord Founder. After the oath, he had never contacted him. But now, for the second time in a day, the head was receiving an assignment. Fear gripped his soul. As he began to read the message, the man wondered if it was about Yuwan again. This time the founder was enraged and threatened. If they dare to check the Lord again, he will kill them. Because of this message, the head of the academy almost lost consciousness. He realized that the founder had known about his intention to let Lin Kun experience Yuwan. Bewilderment hung in the air. The others whispered, not understanding why the leader had turned pale again. What was he going to do with the hero now? The Lord, he would most likely be punished. Be that as it may, he absorbed the energy of all the scrolls, and was guilty. For this reason, he was the first to approach the Lord. Bowing, he apologized for the inconvenience caused, trying to justify himself. However, at this moment, the leader instantly lifted the hero from his bow, asking him not to even dare to apologize. He understood. Yuwan, who the head called a golden talent, had done it unintentionally. If so, then his gift is remarkable. He is a blessing for their academy. They accept him as a genius. After such words, everyone froze, their mouths agape. Absolute silence ensued. No one could believe that the boss, who had been furious just a moment before, had suddenly become so courteous and affectionate. Even Yuwan was puzzled as to why the man had so suddenly taken his hand. Lin Kun was watching the scene jealously, not understanding why the leader was looking at the master with such a gaze. After all, the elder considered himself the favorite of the head, and his heart was broken. The hero was the first to break the silence, delicately asking the chief to finally release his hands. The man coughed awkwardly, apologizing for the excessiveness. He assured that there was no need to worry about the scrolls. At the trial, the Lord took first place, so he will be the first to choose a class. After that, having bid farewell to the hero and the newcomers, the head gentleman withdrew. As he walked away, the leader understood that the founder would kill him if he decided to check Yuwan again. The leader even assumed that perhaps the founder was so concerned about this guy because the Lord was his illegitimate son. Meanwhile, NQUA decided to cautiously approach the hero. However, she was interrupted by another senior student. He introduced himself as the class leader of tactics named Han Bin and cordially invited the hero to join their department. Suddenly, Another one of the senior students appeared, warning that there was nothing interesting in his classmate's classroom. Then he introduced himself. The guy's name was Hun Shan, and he invited the Lord to a combat class, where real male battles would make him even stronger. One of the beauties joined the conversation. She introduced herself as Yao Lin and made it clear that if Ye Xuan chose the potion-making class, she would personally give the boy special attention. With a tempting smile, the girl promised to instruct the hero personally. The students were shocked. Absolutely everyone wanted to get the Lord on their team. They understood. If the hero made the right choice of specialization, he could become the strongest creature on the continent. He already surpassed all known warriors from various clans. Many, naturally, dreamed of being as gifted as the hero. They would have chosen worthy classes, for example, combat or potion making. Considering that the latter had a beautiful class president, and alchemy itself was considered the most respected profession. Aniclimax stood aside, understanding that she had nothing to hope for. Everyone who had made the hero an offer were talented individuals. He would never want to join a craft class that could be disbanded at any moment. However, at this moment, Ye Xuan bowed and thanked all the senior disciples for the invitations. Nevertheless, he had already made his choice. After that, the Lord prepared to announce the decision. 3 older students convinced themselves that they would be the ones chosen. What a shock they experienced when Ye Xuan chose the crafting class under Yu's guidance. Even the girl herself did not expect that the hero would choose her. Elder Hun Shan thought that the younger disciple obviously didn't understand the situation. He explained, the craftsmanship class was the worst in their academy. For several years in a row, no student has entered the Dao, where the hero simply squanders talent. Han Bin made it clear that the Lord still has a chance to attend the tactics class, since it includes part of the knowledge of crafts. The potions master intervened in the conversation. She was clearly upset. The hero didn't want to join her class. After all, the girl considered herself no less attractive than Aniclimax. Ye Xuan could see perfectly well. The beauty was trying to seduce him. However, what puzzled the Lord more was how she was going to fight properly in battle with such voluptuous curves. After that, he carefully pushed away the annoying girl, repeating once again that he had stopped at the choice of a craft class. Then the hero approached his elder and, bowing, asked to show how everything was arranged with them. And Yuwan was in a state of complete shock until the end from what had happened. She seemed to have lost touch with reality from euphoria. It was only when the hero touched her shoulder that the girl came to herself. With a smile, she greeted him in the crafts class and decided to give him a tour. In fact, the beauty was puzzled. What was the hero thinking? With such a talent, he could have chosen any class. She was terribly embarrassed by the thought that Ye Xuan might have stopped at the craft only because of her. This is complete nonsense, and even blushed from unreasonable reflections. In reality, the Lord understood. In combat and other classes, most of the time is spent on practice. He, however, needed books. The craft involves various materials, parts of monsters, and many other aspects. There is the most literature. That's exactly what he wanted. While no one had guessed, the hero found a solution to the secret plan, thanks to which he can accurately restore Lin's word. Yao Lin still didn't give up, trying to win over Ye Xuan. Han Bing was indignant. A good seedling had finally appeared, but it was snatched away by the craft class that everyone looked down on. As the boy was not interested in the offer, the tactics captain decided to leave, inviting Hun Shani along. If he hadn't been bothering Ye Xuan all the time, the hero would have chosen a combat class. Therefore, Han Bin went to the teacher to report the incident, so that Lin Kun could be punished. The class leader couldn't believe he was going to be punished. After all, he was the most gifted student in the class who had never been penalized. Lin Kun was amazed. Despite all the power demonstrated by the hero, he chose a crafting class. He was confident. When they meet on the exams in a month, he will expel his rival from the academy and then prove it is he who is the first genius of the northern region. At this moment, even the hero felt a chill run down his spine, as if someone wished him dead. However, the Lord was not surprised at all, considering how much he had been bothered today. As Lin Kun had other matters to attend to, he announced to the remaining students who had managed to comprehend the scrolls to choose their classes. At this time, the principal was pacing nervously around the academy grounds, realizing he had offended the founder by inappropriately trying to test Ye Xuan. He knew he had to establish a relationship with this guy, try to correct the mistake, and get forgiveness from the founder himself. When the headmaster approached the office, he was informed that the teachers of each class were already waiting in the academic department. Before leaving, the headmaster asked his assistant to send him the lists of all students with their chosen classes. He especially wanted to know which class Ye Xuan had chosen, After that, the man went inside, where the teachers were waiting for him. Everyone bowed their heads at once, greeting the leader. Then he decided to start with the disciples who had entered the Dao this month. The combat class teacher stood up and reported that 7 students had successfully achieved enlightenment. Then the potions teacher stood up, boasting of the successes of her 5 students. The tactics mentor also reported, 2 students have entered his Dao. After that, the craft teacher stood up, apologizing that this month none of their students were able to attain the Dao. The head calmly reminded Han Yiqing's mentor, not only this month, but for the whole year, no one from her class had entered enlightenment. Then the combat class instructor again suggested closing the craft class, realizing that it was impossible to keep the students idle. All the other teachers agreed with the idea. Han Yiqiang also asked to be given a little more time. His colleagues were right. They had given Han Yiqiang too much time, but every year her class only dragged the entire academy backwards. And if the Lord Founder finds out that they are detaining the students, no one will escape severe punishment. The girl tried to explain that craftsmen and alchemists are respected equally throughout the continent. The inability of the craft class to develop is due only to her incompetence. She asked to be replaced, but not to cancel the entire direction. However, the head calmly reminded, "This woman is the best craftmaster in the entire academy. If even she is not capable of developing the class further, then there is no point in its existence in principle." Before the leader announced the closure, an assistant rushed in with a list of classes chosen by the new students. Having passed the list, he immediately deleted himself away. Having glanced over the list, the head quickly noticed the hero's name and his choice, the crafting class. He realized, if the assistant hadn't arrived in time, he would have gotten into huge trouble. All the other teachers froze in tense anticipation as the headmaster delivered the verdict. Therefore, in order to decide the fate of the craft class, he immediately rose from his seat, and he ordered to allocate additional investments to the direction, unprecedented maximum investments. No one expected such news. At that time, Aniclimax was taking the hero on a tour, first showing him the workshop with the smelting furnaces, as well as warehouses where various materials were stored for further use. Then she led the lord to the repository of the books of the ancestors and the teachers of the craft class. Though in other respects their direction was lagging behind, in terms of literature it was the richest of all classes. Too many categories were involved. By this moment, the hero had become convinced that he had made the right choice. They approached the practice hall, which was called Refining and Enlightenment, a phrase the master had once uttered, and his friend had surprisingly remembered very well. Opening the doors, Aniclimax decided to introduce the hero to the other students. At that moment, everyone gathered around one of the comrades who was fiddling with a sword. The teacher tried to distract the students for acquaintance, but they instantly asked the girl to be quiet. One of the brothers is having a critical moment right now. He was creating magical weapons. The Lord was surprised. The transition from ordinary weapons to magical ones is comparable to trying to lift a mountain. Even by his inflated standards, it's a decent result. It was clear. The student was completely focused, sweat was rolling down his face. Nevertheless, he managed to complete the ice formation of the second stage. As the formula was being engraved on the blade, the sword transformed into magical weaponry. Everyone was incredibly proud of their classmate. Last time, he had failed due to insufficiently strong material. This time, the guy had specifically taken the strongest Arctic black iron, capable of withstanding the icy formation of the second stage. After completing the process, he will finally attain the degree of Dao. Moreover, he will be the first one this year to ascend to the highest step. Even Aniclimax clasped her hands in prayer, hoping for her comrade's success. Everyone saw, so far everything is going perfectly, so they were expecting a miracle. Today their classmate would fail. The students immediately became indignant, thinking that the stranger was undermining their morale. Besides, no one had seen him before, so they thought, the newbie doesn't know anything. After all, their comrade had calculated everything down to the smallest detail he couldn't lose. But fate turned out to be merciless. As the Lord had predicted, the blade cracked. Everyone was convinced of the hero's righteousness. It seemed that he was the only one who was not surprised at all. The others were literally ready to burst into tears, not understanding what had gone wrong again. Even the failure himself was perplexed. Why the sword broke again, since he used Arctic black iron? The students did not know how to behave. They were confident. This time the older brother would succeed. The disappointment was especially bitter, given that many had been studying for 3 years already, and their peers in other classes had achieved success. A vicious circle of despair was tightening. They thought, if the older brother succeeds, then they can too. As if the entire class of craftsmen didn't enter the Dao for a whole year, they were probably not good enough. At this moment, the hero turned to the elder with an idea. However, the senior student finally spoke up loudly. It seems he's understood what the mistake is. After which he blamed Yuwan for the failure. The guy was stunned by such accusations. But the senior disciple was convinced. Just as he was about to achieve success, it was precisely the loquacious language of the master, disturbing the heart of the Tao, that led to the failure. Many students saw how the hero spoke up at the crucial moment. They thought the rookie was chattering and distracting his comrade. That's why they decided to blame a stranger for everything. But justice found a defender, and Yue stood up for the new student. The Lord himself was perplexed. Why does everyone take their own defeat so hard, ready to blame others? He was clearly dissatisfied. Instead of acknowledging the failure, they blamed the sun for rising in the west. The senior disciple insisted that it was the hero who had influenced his heart of Tao with his chatter. After all, he had initially planned everything down to the smallest detail. Anyone knows that the environment has an influence. The master knew perfectly well. The heart of the Tao can be influenced, it's true, but not by the environment, by one's own heart. He told the story. 100,000 years ago, the divine artifact, Dragon's Abyss, was created in a raging sea teeming with sea monsters. 90,000 years ago, the divine artifact, Crimson Flame, was born in the underground lava, with a temperature of millions of degrees. And 80,000 years ago, in an infinite storm, the artifact Heavenly Thunder appeared. The environment for creating these artifacts was extremely hazardous and noisy. In such places, you need to be extremely focused, otherwise you'll perish. It's quite amusing when a single remark can throw you off during work. The disciple tried to justify himself. He was still learning, so the environment was able to disrupt his Tao heart. Moreover, none of the crafting class had entered the Tao, so there was a lot of pressure on him. But the truth sounded mercilessly. Yuwan rebuked him. All these are empty words. If the heart of Tao is truly unwavering, even if the sky falls to the earth, it will not react in any way. If the students still do not agree with him, they should change classes. It is obvious that the craft is not for them. The others got angry. What right does some newcomer have to talk to them like that? They made the stranger introduce himself, and Yue stood up for the hero, introducing a new student. The newcomer dares to instruct them. If he pretends to be so capable, let him demonstrate his skills. The elder tried to explain. The hero is a novice, there's no need to be harsh with him. But the Lord was completely not against proving his skill. However, the conditions sounded unexpectedly. Before starting, he needed the students to prepare 10 bells and 3 large drums. They were surprised. What are musical instruments needed for? They decided that the hero wants to use them as materials. But they protested. There's enough junk in the classroom already. To everyone's surprise, one of the senior students agreed to bring everything. NU couldn't believe it. Under such conditions, the Lord was really going to enhance the weapon? Even with great talent, he couldn't master the enhancement ability in just one day. The hero, however, understood that he would have to rely on various techniques from books to restore his strength. Therefore, he couldn't allow the craft class to be cancelled. That's why he decided to help them. The senior disciple wanted to see Yuwan humiliated in front of everyone. As agreed, they brought musical instruments at the hero's request. After which, they immediately ordered the newcomer to start what had been promised. The provocation reached its peak. The Lord asked the disciples to strike all the instruments. The louder, the better. The students were even more outraged. They had never seen such an impudent person before. It seemed that he was trying to humiliate them, after they had explained that it was not allowed to make noise during the strengthening of the weapon. Despite all the doubts, the students still agreed to his demand. Curiosity overcame them. They yearned to see what the mysterious newcomer was capable of, and were ready to create any conditions for him to demonstrate his mastery. Soon the workshop was in complete chaos. The students began banging away on the musical instruments in total disarray, creating a deafening cacophony. Such noise was enough to drive any master crazy. Many understood. Even their experienced mentor could not have perfected magical weapons in such an unbearable environment, let alone a guy who had only just stepped into the academy today. Even the patient, Anzayua, scrunched up her face at the annoying din, doubting the possibility of focusing amid such madness. Meanwhile, the master was struck by the obstinacy of the disciples. Could it be that they still believed that a single word from him could shake their Tao heart? It's time to show them true mastery. Work worthy of admiration even in such unfavorable conditions. The powerful cultivator applied the force of enhancement, and something incredible happened. The disciples froze in amazement, watching as a sky-blue aura danced around Yuwan. Not 10 seconds had passed before the weapon was fully enveloped in a shining haze of perfection. The senior student literally had his mouth agape with shock. Such humiliation exceeded his worst nightmares. He simply couldn't believe what was happening. Chayu instantly recognized the in front of them was a first-class magic weapon, created by pure spiritual power and capable of increasing the spiritual power of its owner by 10%. The senior student no longer knew how to behave. Just a moment ago he was trying to justify his own failure. But now his authority lay in ruins, and his reputation was finally buried under the weight of obviousness. At this tense moment, the master turned to an even more dejected disciple. As the refined weapon approached him, it became clear. The guy had convinced himself of his mistake with his own eyes. The only thing left for him to do was to fall to his knees and humbly apologize for his blunder. The others could hardly believe their eyes. It turned out that Yuwan was not bragging at all. He really possessed the abilities he claimed. Many even refused to acknowledge reality. Could a novice surpass the master himself in skill? Nevertheless, the facts spoke for themselves. The mysterious young man who had entered the academy just this morning was demonstrating truly incredible talent. Even the insightful Enzayao did not expect to encounter such a genius, his abilities surpassing the boldest assumptions. The senior student bowed before the master, asking for forgiveness for his previous arrogance. He acknowledged that he had not known how high the sky was, and wished to offer official apologies as a junior to a senior. Yuwan did not want to see his self-abasement, preferring to simply remain a comrade among his peers. In fact, the master understood. If this young man became his disciple, then the annoying Lin Kun, who had been constantly pestering him, would clearly be extremely dissatisfied with such a development of events. At this moment, the guy timidly asked for guidance, for even the hardest Arctic black iron could not withstand the ice formation of the second stage. He sincerely did not understand how to turn ordinary material into magical weapons. Yuwan realized the apprentice was simply moving in the wrong direction. The secret lay not in using stronger materials, but in weakening one's own strength. If the power of the impact was reduced, the weapon would naturally withstand the load. The senior student wondered if it was worth using the power of the first stage, but immediately objected to himself. The power of the first stage is too small to transform an ordinary object into a magical weapon. However, the Lord calmly noted that he himself had applied the power of the first stage to perfect his creation. The guy was amazed, his mouth agape. How could something like this be possible? Yuwan decided to explain how to achieve the impossible. Using the first stage alone was indeed pointless, but he applied 2 formulas of the first stage simultaneously. To the senior student, it looked like utter nonsense. He had never heard of the possibility of improving a weapon using 2 first stage formulas. In any case, an immediate check was required. Taking the nearest drum, the guy applied first stage ice formation, then used a technique of combining 2 seals. As a result, the instrument he was holding in his hands shone brightly with a heavenly blue haze. The experiment was a success, precisely as the master had predicted. The apprentice could hardly believe that everything had turned out to be so simple. Those present immediately began to praise both the senior student and the novice, who with a single hint had performed a similar miracle. The powerful cultivator understood. The guy had succeeded because he was still a capable student. He had true potential hidden within him. He had just chosen the wrong path of development. Nevertheless, the young man still had questions. According to his calculations, even 2 first stage formulas superimposed on each other could not achieve the power necessary to create a magical instrument. Yuwan explained patiently. This is not a game of numbers where 1 + 1 = 2. No matter how tough the selected material is, if the power of impact is too great, nothing will be achieved. As is known, true refinement transforms a stone into gold, waste into treasures, and decay into grace. The craft represents a sacred art capable of creating genuine wonders, and this happens exactly when 1 + 1 becomes more than 2. All the students listened to his teachings with their mouths agape in amazement. Finally, Yue began to grasp what the art of craftsmanship truly meant. Immediately after his teachings, the bodies of several students shone with a golden aura of enlightenment. All those present became witnesses to an incredible event. Several people simultaneously entered the state of Tao. Meanwhile, in the staff room, the martial arts instructor was still perplexed. Why was the principal not only refusing to cancel the crafts class, but even forcing them to allocate additional resources to it? The head of the academy considered such measures necessary, given the class of craftsmanship's lag. Other classes should take care of it. After all, the advanced ones lead the lagging ones. The lagging ones catch up with the advanced ones, and then everyone moves forward together. In fact, the leader simply couldn't admit that Yuwan was chosen by the founder himself. So there was nothing left to do but to take good care of this guy. At this moment, the potions teacher spoke out against such injustice. Their classes had moved forward solely due to hard work. They had worked long and hard to achieve the results. Why was the lagging craft class now getting more resources? The tactics teacher shared her opinion. Self-improvement initially implies the survival of the fittest. The strong should get more benefits. He didn't see the point in caring for lagging students. In principle, the head understood their correctness, however. He could not openly agree with them. The leader did not understand how he had gotten into such a difficult situation. Although the founder was unlikely to take offense at such circumstances, it was still necessary to come up with a way to appease the disgruntled instructors. Otherwise, his authority would be completely ruined. Even the wise Han Yiqian understood. Since the other instructors did not agree, they did not need additional investments. She was already immensely pleased that the craft class had not been cancelled, and promised to do her best to lead her wards worthily and justify the hopes placed in her. She was simply wasting time. An enraged woman threatened, "Even if the class is not cancelled this year, it will definitely happen next year." Nevertheless, the craft mistress believed their class was capable of gathering strength and surpassing all the others combined. Of course, no one believed her, but the head preferred not to interfere in the dispute between the two women. Suddenly, everyone felt a powerful aura behind them, after which they saw a bright golden light, testifying that someone had entered the Tao. Moreover, the source of the radiance was located precisely in the direction of the crafting class. It was like a slap in the face for the potions teacher, who had just threatened Han Yiqian. Even the head of the sect could hardly believe that someone from the craftsman class had managed to enter the Tao for the first time in a whole year. He assumed. Perhaps it was Yeshuan himself. Soon, however, they noticed several more golden rays. Such a grand event had previously been observed only in the combat class. Everyone was amazed. The craft class had finally cleared out all the accumulated failures. After all, even a cultivator capable of refining first-grade magic weapons could become an honored guest in the northern region. Soon, however, the sky was illuminated by a whole cascade of golden rays emanating from the territory of the craft class. 7 students simultaneously entered the state of Tao. The class of craftsmanship rapidly rose in the academic hierarchy. Han Yiqian literally cried with happiness. Their hard work had finally paid off. The woman hurried to the students who had attained enlightenment to personally congratulate each one. The potions teacher was literally shaking with rage. How was it that the craft class, despised by all, had suddenly produced 7 enlightened ones at the same time? Now they even overshadowed her elite potions class. An enraged woman vowed to find those upstarts and put them in their place. After all, at the academy, only her class should be considered special. Meanwhile, the head of the academy was clearly shocked by such a turn of events. As soon as Yeshuan joined the class, 7 people achieved enlightenment. If his guesses were correct, all of this was definitely connected to the mysterious hero. It was no wonder that the founder was so fiercely protecting him. The rest of the teachers finally understood the true reason for the head's insistence on investing in the craft class. Seizing the moment to their advantage, the academy leader wisely reminded their colleagues, to better understand the world, one must look not only at appearances, but also penetrate to the very essence of phenomena. The teachers had no choice but to apologize for the mistaken accusations against the head, promising not to dare question his decisions in the future. The man himself gladly withdrew, not expecting that taking care of Isuan would not only justify itself, but also further elevate his image in the hearts of his subordinates. Meanwhile, all the students who had achieved enlightenment sat in meditation in the common room. Many envied these chosen ones, as they also aspired to enter their own Tao. After Ishuan's guidance, many students felt the internal pressure ease. They also drew closer to ascending to the Tao. Now everyone unanimously considered the powerful newcomer a true blessing for their class. Soon their mentor rushed into the room, rejoicing that what was happening was not a dream. Her students had indeed attained enlightenment. First and foremost, Han Yikang wanted to personally see those who had entered the Tao. Having bypassed everyone and counted, she made sure. Exactly 7 people had achieved enlightenment. As was to be expected, the woman could barely hold back tears of joy. She had always known that they were capable of this. Their efforts had not been in vain. The meditation was finally coming to an end. Many rejoiced that they had finally entered the Tao. Although it took a considerable amount of time, everything brought its own rewards. Now no one will dare say that the craft class is good for nothing. Right after that, Anchuya noticed their mentor who had come to support them and immediately rushed into Han Yiqian's arms. The pink-haired class representative began to enthusiastically tell how she and all the other students had finally achieved enlightenment. The teacher immediately began to praise her students, calling them rays of sunshine for the whole class. The woman believed that all of this was the merit of the senior disciple. Thanks to his magical improvement, 6 more were able to enter the Dao, finally gaining a new meaning in the craft. However, the senior disciple honestly explained that the enhancement had not been successful for him. Instead, Yeshuan taught them the true path to Dao. Naturally, the teacher also yearned to take a look at this unknown master. But Anchuya explained, he is not a master at all, but a new student who enrolled in the academy just this morning. The pink-haired beauty began to search for their incredible genius with her gaze, but he seemed to have dissolved into thin air. Then one of the students reported on the hero's desire to go to the library to read books. Many were surprised by this choice, considering reading to be a rather dull activity. In fact, Yeshuan simply sought to make up for the wasted time as soon as possible. He decided to spend the rest of his training in the library of the craft class. Upon entering the sacred halls of knowledge, the Lord saw a gray-bearded old man diligently tidying up between the ancient shelves. The Keeper of Wisdom had, of course, heard the astonishing news about the 7 craft class students who had entered the Dao at the same time. Such a collective enlightenment was extremely rare. The elder believed that it was all about improving the craftsmanship skills of young Han Yiqian, which was beneficial to the students who were watching her. At this moment, Yeshuan approached him from behind, politely greeting the respected elder. The stranger introduced himself as a new apprentice in the craft class, who had come to study books. The library keeper was somewhat surprised to see the new student, but warmly let him in, only asking him to be careful and not to damage the ancient folios. In fact, although the old man didn't show it outwardly, he immediately realized that Yeshuan was far from being as simple as he seemed. After all, an experienced cultivator hadn't even sensed the young man's approach. This prompted him to test the hero. If he truly possessed talent, the Guardian of Wisdom wouldn't mind giving him some valuable advice. He simply wanted to start studying the books. In half an hour, the powerful cultivator had already read several volumes, and finished another one, after which he reached for the shelf for a new book. It was then that the old man approached to give advice. The keeper understood. It's not worth swallowing food without chewing it properly. He remembered that in his youth everyone was patient, but he did not want to show excessive persistence, realizing how hard it was for young geniuses to accept. After all, every talent strives to show itself immediately. This rule the old man had already tested on many gifted students. However, to the great surprise of the librarian, the hero simply calmly thanked him for the advice and promised to be more careful in the future. Such a reaction was truly astonishing. This guy didn't follow the stereotypes the old man had observed for years at all. The man tried to be more patient, realizing he didn't want to lose his own dignity. So he patted the hero on the shoulder, intending to find out if he was pretending to be a simpleton, or really didn't understand the hidden meaning of the words. Yeshuan reminded the venerable elder that he had heeded the teachings and was grateful for them. The librarian then couldn't help but explain that he had only wanted to test the hero and not instruct him at all. After what he had heard, Yeshuan had to immediately demonstrate his talent. Then the old man would give him valuable advice, and if his abilities turned out to be truly outstanding, he might even pass on his legacy. Perhaps the hero really did not understand what was happening. The hero, however, realized that perhaps times had drastically changed, and now even the sweeping monks were forcibly trying to hand out sacred scriptures left and right. Seeing that the mysterious student was in a stupor, the librarian became even more enraged, demanding an immediate demonstration of talent. Instead, the hero very politely informed that he did not need the inheritance of the venerable old man, after which he bowed and simply thanked the elder for the generous offer. The Keeper of Wisdom considered this young man a real madman. How dare he treat the legacy with such disdain, which was personally given to him by the Lord Founder himself. The elder decided to teach the ignorant brat a good lesson. After these words, Yeshuan realized that today, he would probably no longer be able to read books in peace. Anyway, in an attempt to reconcile with the enraged old man, he explained that the legacy of the latter was the technique of the 9 blinding lights. The librarian was stunned in bewilderment, unable to understand how Yeshuan had uncovered his greatest secret. But the master not only knew the name of the secret technique, he also understood that the elder had long been stuck on the 5th stage of cultivation. After several failed attempts to break through, fire and poison had taken over his heart, relentlessly approaching his mortal hour. Although perhaps the guardian himself is not yet aware of such subtleties, the man experienced real horror before the mysterious hero, asking himself only one question: who is he? However, Yeshuan understood that such knowledge was not particularly necessary for the old man. Instead, the Lord offered advice that would help the librarian make a breakthrough. In fact, the old man lived in seclusion among books because his time was coming to an end. He passionately wanted to find a brilliant student to pass on all his accumulated knowledge. But if Yuwan is telling the truth and can really help break through to the higher level, then the wounds will be healed. That's why the Guardian of Wisdom proudly declared, if the hero helps him reach the next level, he will fulfill any wish of the young master. In principle, such a promise to the Lord was more than enough. The fingers of the powerful cultivator shone with a golden light, and he directed the power of Lin's word at the old man. At that moment, the librarian's eyes rolled back, and he let out a piercing shriek. Even the entire library began to glow with a mystical golden light, testifying to the miracle of transformation that was taking place. However, literally in an instant, the mystical golden glow dissolved, as if nothing had happened. When the librarian fell to his knees, he realized a previously unknown formula had appeared in his mind. If he succeeds in grasping its essence, it will definitely help to make a breakthrough to the next level. Yuwan suggested that the venerable elder go out onto the street and practice there, and when he gets tired, he can return to the Lord, and the hero will provide further assistance. In fact, the powerful cultivator just wanted to get rid of the librarian for a while, as he had expended a lot of energy. It was necessary to read a lot of books as soon as possible to make up for lost time. The old man immediately bowed to the hero, respectfully calling him senior, and withdrew. Meanwhile, outside the library, a heated argument broke out between two guys. They couldn't believe that the old man sweeping the floors turned out to be the unparalleled master. One of the comrades even suggested that their friend had simply been deceived. But the disputant understood. This is impossible. The brilliant student of the combat class had sold him this information for a round sum. The guy asked his friends to calm down. Back then, their comrade also claimed to have bought information about a book with incredible techniques. As a result, they spent the whole night digging a hole behind the houses, almost falling into it themselves, and the words turned out to be a lie. Nevertheless, the guy asked not to worry. This time the source was extremely reliable. Money was of no interest to him at all. After all, his father had already spent half of the family's fortune to allow his son to enter the academy and become a volunteer student of the combat class. The young man was simply obliged to justify his parents' expectations. Moreover, if there was a chance to become stronger, it was worth any money. He was not embarrassed at all that almost every time he made a fool of himself. While they argued, the Keeper of Wisdom found a secluded spot for meditation, trying to decipher the mysterious formula. Even a moment of understanding this mystery was worth many years of diligent practice. Unfortunately, the old man was distracted by the external noise. At this moment, that very chubby man was trying to demonstrate his skills. An invincible stone defense, an iron head, and even concentration on one finger. After all these maneuvers, the preparation of the Puliash was completed. He poured himself out completely, hoping that someone would understand what a valuable talent he possessed. Instead, the old man just yelled that the guy should practice somewhere else and not make noise on library territory. The rich man panicked. Events were unfolding clearly not in the direction he had counted on. The Keeper of Wisdom was furious with this fool, not understanding what he had forgotten here. Besides, the elder realized that his dear Yuwan would be extremely displeased if someone interfered with his reading. At this moment, the little fatty reminded him that according to the established procedure, the master should check him. Seeing great talent and having successfully passed the test, the mentor is obliged to teach the apprentice various skills. However, the coach saw no talent whatsoever in the boy, so immediately sent him off in the direction of his native class. Moreover, he threw him quite far. The librarian finally realized that he had simply wasted his time dealing with the annoying visitor, and soon the old man heard the hero's voice. He had read all the books on the first floor and now needed the keys to the locked second floor. Meanwhile, the rich man himself landed. He couldn't believe that with one blow the cleaner had sent him flying. So the other man was indeed an unparalleled master, and he was just lucky to have stayed alive. But the fat man was full of determination. Next time, he would definitely succeed. At that moment, the Lord was already deeply studying books on the first floor of the library. Soon he heard footsteps behind him, and assumed that the keeper had brought the long-awaited keys. However, turning around, Yuwan saw only a fat guy, adorned with gold and precious stones. The rich man also noticed that the hero looked very young. Most likely, he had recently entered the academy. After that, he introduced himself as the first genius of the combat class. Understanding that Yuwan was not familiar with this place, the fat boy suggested hanging out together. That way, he would get to know the local life. In fact, the guy just wanted to befriend the hero, realizing that all the students of the academy belong to the elite, and good relations with people can help him. The fatty clearly didn't expect such an uninterested reaction, so he revealed a great secret to Yuwan. The janitor here is actually the unparalleled master. After a while, the extraordinary talent of the rich man will attract the attention of the elder, and after passing the tests, he will be able to receive an invaluable legacy. Puliash promised to put in a good word for Yishuan, and he would definitely get some benefits. The guy seemed to be not afraid at all that someone would steal his chance. The rich man immediately noticed the book in Yeshuan's hands, after which he openly laughed, demonstrating his disdain for such literature. At this moment, the Keeper of Wisdom approached, bringing with him the keys to the second floor. While the fat man bowed respectfully and apologized for disturbing the great master, the latter completely ignored the annoying visitor. Instead, the elder ran up to the hero with a smile, bowed respectfully, and handed the elder the precious keys. It was only then that the rich man finally realized who he had just been talking to. After that, the librarian turned his attention to the young man and explained to the master that he could throw the fat boy out of the library at any moment if he was a nuisance. His aura seemed familiar, although Yeshuan couldn't recall him in any way. Then the venerable elder calmly introduced the young man, Jing Dabao, whose father was the largest merchant in the northern region. The merchant's family was thriving, but the chubby young man, alas, possessed no talents or skills. His parent had paid a substantial sum for his son to become a free listener in the combat class. Yeshuan recalled another person with similar qualities, and even speculated that Jing Dabao might be his descendant. At that moment, the fatty himself realized, if the great master calls Yeshuan a senior, then he must be an even more powerful mentor. The boy decided to befriend this genius no matter what. It had no relation to the hero. He would have preferred to read books on the second floor. The little boy unexpectedly ran up to him, calling the hero his older brother, after which he fell to his knees, begging to be taken as a disciple. The powerful cultivator made it clear that he hadn't taken on an apprentice in years, and had no intention of accepting junior disciples, especially since he didn't want to waste his precious time on it. Jing Dabao tried to persuade him, talking about family wealth, money, resources, magical weapons, and even women. He could get anything he wanted. He only required books. For this reason, the guy stumbled at first, and then began to think feverishly. The chubby guy decided that the hero was thus giving him a hint, after which he demonstrated several erotic booklets, ready to provide any literature to the taste of his older brother. At this moment, Yeshuan's patience meter finally went off the charts. With one swift kick, he threw the annoying guy out of the library. However, he didn't lose his spirit at all. Jing Dabao rubbed his sore head and got to his feet. The Keeper of Wisdom made it clear that with such mediocre abilities, it was no longer worth the little ball of fluff bothering the elder and asking for mercy. But the chubby one was sure. The golden will would open the path to success, and loudly proclaiming his determination, he declared, even if his elder brother would not accept him today, then he would kneel down here and never stand up. It seems that even the elder was not particularly excited about it. The librarian calmly wished the stubborn man good luck and left. All this time, Yeshuan was remembering that very person from the past. When they met, he had not yet attained the status of an immortal deity, but his combat prowess was second to none. The warrior was invincible among immortals, and himself possessed the potential to become an immortal deity. The Lord understood. Perhaps if he were to train the descendant of that person, it would help in the realization of his grand plan for revenge. Nevertheless, the Lord still doubted. Was Jing Daba worthy of his mentorship? Even after half an hour, the chubby guy hadn't budged from the spot. In a month, the term of his free listenership would expire, and he couldn't let his older brother simply ignore him. This was his last chance to change his fate. He was suddenly distracted by two battered comrades who literally flew up to him in a panic. Jing Dabao immediately hastened to find out what had happened to them. The frightened friends begged the brother to leave immediately, explaining that a dangerous guy named Chen Bo was heading this way. As if nothing had happened, a tall guy approached the rich man, still yawning. He was too sluggish after sleep. Having calmly explained that he had been short of money lately, he asked Jing Dabao to lend him nearly 2 million sir. The frightened fat man reminded them that they had already agreed on a monthly payment of 12,000 for protection. However, he constantly demanded more money. It turned out that the whole thing was that in a month, Jing Dabao would leave the academy, which means he wouldn't be able to pay for protection. To avoid a similar situation, the thug wanted to get paid for several years in advance. Of course, it was a glaring injustice. Pukliash didn't see the point in paying for protection when he was already leaving the academy. However, these reasonable arguments did not convince the intimidating extortionist in the least. He merely insisted that Jing Dabao had better pay. The Guardian of Wisdom watched from nearby, understanding that the big guy was clearly overdoing it. However, the old man suddenly received a mental order from the hero not to interfere in the situation, so he submitted to the will of the master. Meanwhile, Jing Dabao politely tried to explain to the older brother that he didn't have that much money. He even offered to check his pockets. It seems the healthy man was not convinced at all. He demanded that the young man borrow money from his rich father and graciously gave him 3 days. Otherwise, before the fat man leaves the academy, he will lose several vital organs. The other guys were horrified by how openly this guy was intimidating the students. They reminded him that the head of the academy could punish him for such behavior as soon as he found out. Would the head punish a full-fledged student for a useless auditor? After that, he struck Jing Dabao in the stomach with force, explaining that he could even disembowel and tear him to pieces. No one would even remember him. The fatty experienced a burning humiliation, realizing, if he had real strength, this would not have happened. He couldn't reconcile himself to his miserable situation. Suddenly, the young boy heard an order in his head to hit that scamp. Turning around, he realized it was a call to action from his older brother. Jing Dabao, of course, was aware that the difference in combat power was colossal. Attacking such an opponent was equivalent to suicide. However, Yuwan promised to give him a chance to change his fate. He could either while away his days living the life of a common outcast, or embark on a thorny path that could lead to invincibility. Now it depended only on the little ball of fluff itself, whether it could awaken its dormant lineage and change its fate for the better. At that moment, the ruffian was already preparing to leave, reminding that in 3 days he would return for the silver. Otherwise, he would simply kill such an idler. Even Jing Dabao's friends couldn't do anything about it. All they could do was tell their families what was happening. Besides, they knew perfectly well, the chubby boy really didn't want to ask his relatives for help. The guardian of wisdom saw a glaring injustice, but understood. In this world, the flesh of the weak was the food of the strong. Such was the unyielding law of existence. However, it seemed that Jing Dabao no longer wished to live the life of a miserable outcast. Hearing the mumbling under the breath of the weakling, the bully turned around, intending to find out what the young man was whispering to himself. At that moment, the chubby boy with fists pounced on the offender. He yearned to be the master of his own life for at least one moment. The blow dealt by the Polyash was filled with such ferocity that lightning danced around his hands. After this imagination-stunning blow, the giant even flew back several meters. Comrades were stunned in amazement, unable to believe that Jing Dabao had actually managed to stand up for himself. Even the elder could not believe what was happening, although he realized, most likely, this was the result of Yuwan's interference. The brute was clearly infuriated by such audacity. No one had ever dared to hit him. Not even his father had ever raised a hand to him. That's why the scoundrel swore to disembowel the insolent fat man today and tear him to pieces. Otherwise, he was unworthy of bearing the surname Chen. Right after these words, the comrades stood up to defend Jing Dabao, promising to detain the madman until their brother escaped. However, he stepped forward, making it clear that none of them would be harmed, since he himself had to deal with his own problems. In fact, the boy understood. Yuwan would never deceive him. If the master said to defeat this person, it meant the senior brother saw his chances of winning. Now he had to prove it himself. For this reason, the fatty attacked the enemy again with a powerful fist strike. He immediately received a retaliatory blow to the face, from which it seemed he lost a couple of teeth. After that, the bully tossed him into the air, intending to take revenge on the trash that had dared to attack him. The aggressor believed that the opponent had become too brazen, or he himself had lost his grip if he allowed such a thing. He then rushed into battle, awarding the fat man with several more painful blows. Meanwhile, the Lord calmly watched the fight, not interfering. For the only way to awaken the combat heavenly body of 100 refinements was to subject it to mortal danger. Therefore, he realized, for Jing Dabao, the trial had only just begun. The bully retreated only after the chubby boy fell powerless. Let this be a lesson to all who dare to provoke him. Friends begged the young man to tell his family everything. They would kill him if he continued to resist and fight in the same spirit. However, the thug decided to haggle. Now 1 million is not enough. Given that Jing Dabao dared to hit him, he must pay another 1 million on top as compensation. When those present heard the sum of 2,700,000, everyone considered it to be outright robbery. Nevertheless, Jing Dabao got back on his feet, reminding himself that the fight was not over yet. So far, he would not give his opponent a single silver coin. Comrades immediately set out to persuade the stubborn one to simply surrender. However, he reminded them that he was fighting not just for his life. Pukliash explained that he wants to prove to himself and those around him, he's not a reject. Fighting with unwavering determination, the boy understood. His older brother was a great man who must have compelling reasons if he wanted to continue the battle. This meant that today's outcome would determine whether he could move forward or not. The strongman realized that Jing Dabao had finally gone crazy and was seeking death. He was not averse to helping to fulfill this desire. Therefore, he prepared to use his crown technique, Tiger's Fist. After the first blow to the face, the guy flew back, slamming into the ground. The aggressor was only convinced. Jing Dabao is a real idiot. Apparently, he wanted to change his life, but this will remain just a dream. He also warned the others. He would appear in 3 days, and they had to collect 2,800,000. Otherwise, they would face death. The Guardian of Wisdom, who had been carefully watching the fight, understood that the strongman was indeed too aggressive, and Jing Dabao was simply too weak to win. The elder was curious about the plan of the powerful mentor. At this moment, the Lord had just completed the most complex preparation. He directed the power of the word Lin at the younger student, and he watched as the fatty's body instantly began to absorb the directed energy. As a result, Yuwan gave him the 100 Perfections technique, allowing him to become a saint and fight against the heavens themselves. As soon as this powerful technique was absorbed by the body, Jing Dabao immediately got to his feet, ready to continue the battle. The giant didn't expect his opponent to withstand his attack and still be standing. The result of subsequent attacks will be exactly the same. Rushing into another attack, the aggressor decided to finally destroy all the hopes of his opponent. The next blow he again aimed straight at the fat man's face. Comrades Puliasha were literally crying, not understanding why Jing Dabao was tormenting himself like that. Even the wise old man realized. After all this, the young boy would be seriously hurt. However, at the decisive moment, the brute felt that something had gone wrong. Soon he noticed the incredible. Jing Dabao was able to block his blow. The librarian and his companions were beside themselves with amazement, while the powerful hero watched the proceedings with an unruffled smile. Jing Dabao squeezed his opponent's hand with such inhuman strength that he couldn't even break free. The giant desperately accused the young man of using demonic magic. Now that the enemy has been sufficiently demoralized and confused, the time for retribution has come. The frightened aggressor suddenly remembered his status, desperately reminding everyone that he was an official student of the academy. He couldn't be treated like that. However, Jing Dabao was not bothered by this at all. Focusing all his accumulated rage, he aimed a powerful blow directly at the opponent's solar plexus. The body of the brute soared into the air, and the trajectory of its flight flashed with electrical discharges. With a single blow, the arrogant tyrant was completely overthrown. His pride lay in ruins, and his body was embedded in the stone wall of the pavilion. Jing Dabao slowly approached the defeated enemy, contemplating the pitiful scene of defeat. Comrades, the stout ones were frozen in silent amazement, unable to comprehend what was happening. Their big elder brother had indeed sent the formidable thug into a knockout flight. The Guardian of Wisdom, watching from the library, realized the greatness of what had been accomplished. The young man had just achieved physical rebirth. The Lord rejoiced in his soul. His hopes were fully justified. In that case, this young man should definitely become the next one on his cherished list of the chosen. And he turned out to be absolutely right. Around Jing Dabao, a divine golden aura of enlightenment danced. The young man had achieved ascension in the Tao and awakened to a new reality. At this very moment, Han Yiqian's mentor was asking her disciple to take her to the legendary genius Yuwan. The woman was eager to meet him as soon as possible to clear everything up. However, on their way, they noticed a mystical beam of light, testifying that someone had entered the state of Tao. The source of the glow was in the direction of the Pavilion of Hidden Writings, where the mysterious cultivator was currently located. Therefore, they immediately rushed forward, wanting to understand what was happening. Meanwhile, Lin Kun was reported a stunning news. The person who had entered the Tao in the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion belonged to the warrior class. As is known, in addition to the 7 enlightened ones from the craftsman class, another genius has emerged. At that place, there were currently 2. Senior disciple Chengbo and auditor Jing Dabao. Everyone naturally expected that the first one would achieve enlightenment. This would be excellent news, a way not to let the craftsman class surpass them. Lin Kun immediately ordered to go to the pavilion and gather as many people as possible to solemnly welcome the new enlightened disciple. He wished for everyone to know that his class under his unparalleled leadership was the strongest in the academy. After the arrogant class president was humiliated at the last welcoming ceremony, the head of the academy had grown even more displeased with him. Now the young man desperately sought to restore his tarnished reputation. Finally, having completed a brief meditation, Jing Dabao gently descended to the ground. His comrades couldn't rejoice enough. Finally, their brother had achieved enlightenment and stopped being a loser. However, as he approached the transformed disciple, Yuwan made it clear that his body was only awakening, and that a long and arduous path of refinement lay ahead of the young man. Bowing respectfully at once, Jing Dabao solemnly promised that from this moment on, he would strictly follow the example of his elder brother, never opposing his will and fulfilling every sacred instruction. At this moment, the classcraft instructor arrived accompanied by the head girl, Yi. Yuwan calmly explained that he had just been instructing a student. The teacher instantly understood. The student who was under the patronage of the powerful hero was the same young man who had attained the Tao. The woman was stunned by his dizzying achievements. After that, the pink-haired beauty introduced them to their craft teacher, Mrs. Han Quan. 3 companions of Jing Dabao immediately opened their mouths in awe of the otherworldly beauty of the 2 women, but immediately met with the elder brother's disdainful gaze. The master bowed politely, greeting his mentor. After all, she had heard that Yuwan, having joined their class, had taught students who had achieved enlightenment. Even before him, she was ashamed to be called a teacher. At this moment, the young boy finally realized that his older brother belonged to the craft class, and even thought about transferring to the same class. It was then that Han Yiqian spoke about the fact that the young man the hero was helping did not belong to their class. Suddenly, a loud noise was heard near the pavilion. It turned out that the students of the combat class had arrived there with joyful shouts. They began to congratulate their senior student on achieving enlightenment. Yuwan didn't understand what kind of show they had put on. Everyone thought that Lin Kun had simply lost his mind. Even the teacher decided to figure out what he had planned. However, the arrogant class leader simply wanted to celebrate the 8th student in his class to have entered the Tao. And Kyuya reminded her that it was too grand of a show just to show off in front of them. Considering that even they had 7 people achieve enlightenment at the same time, they didn't put on such a theatrical display. However, Lin Kun reminded them that their craft class had been at the very bottom of the list for many years, and it was only this year that they had decent students. Therefore, they couldn't compare their pathetic class to his elite unit. Many took the side of their haughty elder, so they all went together to congratulate the new enlightened student. NQUA was seething with indignation. She thought Lin Kun was too arrogant and didn't understand why Han Yichen was silent in response to his provocations. In fact, the wise lady thought that Lin Kun's words contained a share of truth. But instead of engaging in useless verbal disputes, it's better to silence them with real achievements. And Kyoya sincerely did not understand why her opponents were being so arrogant. She did not see any particular superiority in the fact that they had one more student. However, Yuwan asked his older sister not to worry. Instead, it was worth going and watching the upcoming events. For Lin Kun's overconfidence would soon turn against himself. Both girls realized, perhaps the mysterious cultivator had another ace up his sleeve. That's why they followed him, wanting to see with their own eyes what would happen. Meanwhile, inside the pavilion, the young men were joyfully praising one of the elder brothers for achieving enlightenment. However, upon entering, they found no one. Even the most perceptive ones began to look around, searching for where the older brother had gone. Suddenly, one of the students pointed to a distant corner of the wall. There they saw that very elder brother, unconscious. How could this have happened, given that according to their information, he had just entered enlightenment? However, Jing Dabao, who appeared behind them, calmly made it clear that it was he who had attained the Tao and not some Cheng Bo. No one could believe that someone like him had attained enlightenment. They thought of him as just a dropout loser who could never defeat their mighty older brother. However, the emerging guardian of wisdom stopped all the arguments, solemnly stating that the person who had entered the Tao was indeed Jing Dabao. He had personally witnessed this sacred transformation. Lin Kun literally blazed with fury, realizing, in that case, Cheng Bo had ruthlessly humiliated him, and there was no mercy to be expected. The lord who entered merely laughed at the fool who had staged such a grand performance only to come and humiliate himself. Nevertheless, Lin Kun insisted. Jing Dabao also trained in the combat class. He explained, since the kid had achieved enlightenment, he had the right to become a full-fledged student. Therefore, the arrogant class leader asked him to submit a transfer application. In principle, the fatty understood. This was indeed an excellent opportunity. Right after that, Lin Kun proclaimed triumphantly, "If even auditors in their class can enter enlightenment, then the crafting class is a gathering of trash that doesn't even dare to dream of competing with them." However, Yuwan calmly reminded him that there was no compulsory rule that required combat class auditors to enroll there. The arrogant young man retorted that their class was the strongest in the academy. He didn't understand why someone who had achieved enlightenment would go to the weakest class of craftsmanship. However, to Lin Kun's utter astonishment, Jing Dabao showed the most intense interest precisely in Ms. Han Yiqian's class. He immediately dropped to his knees before the noble lady and bowed his head in a respectful bow. He explained that he wished to join the craft class, and asked for her gracious approval. The only one who had expected such a turn of events was the powerful hero himself. The other students thought the boy had simply lost his mind, talking about transferring to a craft class. They began to remind him. The combat class ranks first in the academy and cannot yield to a lower class like craft. Silence fell only when the haughty class leader sternly ordered his classmates to be quiet. Turning to his younger brother with ostensible remorse, he apologized for all the suffering that the poor auditor had endured. As the senior, he asked for forgiveness for his neglect. Lin Kun solemnly promised, as soon as the young man returns to the combat class, he will personally make Chengbo compensate for all the extortion. Moreover, the gates to the secret books will be opened to the young man, and the head boy himself will deign to give him personal guidance. Deep down, the arrogant young man understood that such tempting conditions would inevitably incline Jing Dabao to return, and his triumphant return to the combat class would be a complete victory over the despised crafting class. Classmates began to persuade the fat boy not to reject such a generous offer, especially after the public apologies of the headman. Admission to the combat class opened a direct path to the heights of power, while choosing a craft class doomed one to eternal obscurity. And Qiuyue looked at Han Yiqian with pleading eyes, calling on the mentor not to remain indifferent and to make her own proposal to Jing Dabao. Despite all their efforts, the combat class was able to offer incomparably better conditions. The gap in resources was too great for fair competition. Nevertheless, Yeshuan calmly asked both ladies not to be plagued by doubts. He had boundless faith that Jing Dabao would make the only correct decision, and as if in response to this unwavering faith, the young man stood up. Apologizing to the elder for declining the tempting offer, he solemnly proclaimed his choice, the craft class, for it was where his older brother Yeshuan resided. Lin Kun was shocked by such recklessness. He couldn't understand how someone could reject brilliant prospects for some newcomer. Haired Beauty intervened in the altercation, sharply reminding Lin Kun of his crushing defeat. It was time to stop this humiliating show. Even the teacher suggested stopping. The students had the sacred right to choose their own path independently. After this, the wise mentor led the young man to process his admission documents. As she left the pavilion, Anchuya sarcastically thanked Lin Kun for such a grand welcoming ceremony for the new student in their craft class. But hardly had the procession moved away when the enraged elder let out a thunderous cry, ordering everyone to freeze in place. The patience of the craft's elder had run out. It seemed that Han Yiqian had already explained everything, but this stubborn man refused to back down. The arrogant young man declared the true reason for his anger. Since Jing Dabao was not a member of the combat class, it was time to settle the score for beating up a senior fellow. After such public humiliation, he could not allow his offender to go unpunished. The fatty tried to object. Chengbo was the first to raise his hand. He was just defending himself. However, such justifications were of no significance to the class monitor. Anyone daring to raise a hand against a member of his elite class must suffer just retribution. And Qiuyue bravely stood up to defend her comrade, blocking Lin Kun's path with her slender body. But he contemptuously walked around the girl, warning, "This time no one will be able to stop him." The air shuddered from the release of lethal energy. Lin Kun unleashed the venomous devouring snake technique on the helpless young man, one of the devastating combat skills designed to destroy the internal meridians. He intended to permanently rob Jing Dabao of his ability to cultivate. Realizing the mortal danger, Han Yiqian screamed in horror, ordering her disciple to flee immediately. Whatever the opponents undertook, there was no salvation anymore. At this fateful moment, Yeshuan himself stood up to defend his protégé. With just 2 fingers, the master instantly dispersed the flying technique, as if swatting away an annoying fly. Witnesses were frozen in silent shock. One of the strongest techniques of a class leader was destroyed by a simple move by just a novice. Compared to the power of the mysterious cultivator, everyone else seemed like pitiful weaklings. Lin Kun was seething with rage. How dare this upstart interfere, as if he thought himself an immortal deity? The hero warned the overconfident elder. Any attempts at resistance or attack are doomed to fail. The enraged elder decided to put an end to the disputes with the rough force of his fists. But at the decisive moment, Han Yiqian stood between the opponents. The noble mentor reminded, no one dares to threaten her students in her presence. She couldn't understand how Lin Kun dared to do such a thing in the presence of a teacher. In the situation that had developed, so as not to risk it, the haughty young man had to retreat. It would no longer be so easy for him to get away with it. Suddenly, the mentor of the combat class appeared in defense of his ward. The man was puzzled as to why Han Yikang was showing such unwarranted aggression towards his talented student. When Lin Kun tried to justify himself, the teacher cut him off sharply. He already knew all the ins and outs of what was happening. As if nothing had happened, the mentor demanded that Han Yiqian hand over his disciple Jing Dabao to him. Then he would pretend that today's events had never occurred. Jing Dabao was already a student of the craft class. The man calmly reminded him of the formalities. The documents have not been processed yet, therefore. Officially, the young man remains an auditor. He offered Han Yikan to take the last chance to correct the situation. Then the resolute mentor held up her teaching plaque, solemnly proclaiming, "As a teacher, she possesses special powers to accept students each semester, exempting her from unnecessary formalities." In this case, she decided to use this rule for the sake of Jing Dabao. After such a statement, her decision became final and was not subject to appeal. The mentor of the combat class was clearly annoyed at Han Yikang's willingness to go so far and even oppose the elite class for the sake of a single student. Nevertheless, she remained a teacher and could not help but defend her pupils. Otherwise, her existence would have been meaningless. In addition, the woman reminded that her craft class was no longer the weak subdivision it used to be. Unfortunately, the head of the combat class could not argue with such a statement. Anchayuya was shocked to finally see how bold and determined their mentor could be. The Lord was delighted that Han Yichan had turned out to be a truly responsible teacher, although in some aspects she had not met his expectations. In the midst of the conflict, the head of the academy finally deigned to appear in person, accompanied by professors of potion-making and tactics. All present bowed respectfully, greeting their superior. The tactics teacher inquired about the reasons for such a public clarification of relations between colleagues with an ironic smile. The potions teacher venomously noted, after 7 students of the crafts class entered the Dao at the same time, the class was filled with self-confidence and even dared to challenge the combat class. The head of the combat class spoke up immediately, explaining that Jing Dabao had beaten his student, and that Han Yiqian was protecting the offender instead of meting out a just punishment. The wise mentor immediately countered. Jing Dabao had acted solely in self-defense. After listening to the explanations, the head of the academy ordered both sides to stop arguing. Instead of feudal disputes, they should participate in the academy's competitions. Everyone recalled that it had been 3 years since the cessation of such competitions. They were completely unprepared and did not understand the reasons for the renewal of the tradition this year. He had received a message from the founder himself. There had been changes with the demon seals in the southern kingdom. 100,000 dark spawn could break through the restraining charms and burst out. To cope with the impending catastrophe, the Lord Founder ordered the resumption of the talent selection competition. Moreover, this time the contest will be attended by elite students from several great clans. But the true gem of the announcement was the prize for the winner. Enlightenment through the true scriptures of Wando. Everyone around the Lord whispered in reverent awe. Something like this seemed like an incredible dream. Many were ready to risk their lives for such a reward. Yexuan seemed to completely misunderstand the reason for the commotion. Then, An Shaiwei explained with a sigh, the true scriptures were the greatest treasure of the academy. Legends had it that they contained all the techniques in the world, and those few who had grasped their secrets throughout history became the most powerful of cultivators. The Lord was genuinely surprised that he had not heard of such a legendary book before. It became clear, after studying it, he would no longer need to read other techniques. The head of the academy, however, was aware that the founder had specifically instructed him to offer the true scriptures of Wanda as a reward. Now, he suspected that it was somehow related to the mysterious Ye Xuan. At that moment, the mentor of the combat class obediently bowed to the head's order, suggesting to leave the situation unchanged. They would definitely put the upstarts in their place during the academic competitions. The last to leave the pavilion was Lin Kun himself, who threw a menacing warning at Ye Xuan. They were retreating today, but the confrontation between them was far from over. It was only after this that the group of craft class was finally left alone, and Qiuyue warned the master with anxiety about Lin Kun's vengeful and ominous nature. He should be cautious. Even if the arrogant young man tried to harm him, it would ultimately be the young man himself who would suffer. After all the curious onlookers had dispersed, the potions teacher withdrew with a scornful look, deciding that nothing else was worthy of her attention. The head of the academy addressed the remaining ones with parting words, calling to disperse and prepare for the upcoming great gathering. The academy must not be disgraced. Everyone bowed respectfully before the high-ranking officials before dispersing. Events are mixed in the hidden halls of Mount Shiwan. In the depths of the ancient forests, faithful followers bowed before their superior. By this time, news of the impending changes in the Demon Seals, as well as the announcement of the upcoming start of the Wanda Academy competitions, had reached the Lord. The Dark King ordered his minions to disrupt the competition and seize the legendary true writings of Wanda. With their own strength, such a task seemed extremely difficult. Moreover, there were rumors that the ancient guardians of the Academy would instantly recognize demons upon invasion, but the leader of darkness calmed his faithful servants. There was no need to worry in vain. The statue used to detect other races at the Academy had cracked inexplicably a few days ago. Now it would be much easier to blend in with the crowd. Moreover, the demons were not the only ones who wanted to take advantage of the academic competitions. Therefore, the chances of success increased many times. The Lord of Shadows reminded, in this operation, the future of the entire demon race was at stake. Only triumph was allowed. Failure meant death. After these words of their lord, all the demons immediately bowed, accepting the sacred order. Meanwhile, in other dark chambers, another demon king received information about the start of the Academy's great competitions. He ordered his assistant to obtain the true scriptures. This artifact will be invaluable for the prosperity of their clan. The girl just smiled calmly, promising not to let her master down. In a secluded lair of revenge, somewhere in a similarly gloomy solitude, an ancient old man sat, to whom these tidings had also reached. He merely sneered. He had been waiting too long for the day when the competition would resume. Touching the ground with a trembling hand, the vengeful old man ordered his disciple to rise. A ominous purple haze spread immediately throughout the area, and from the depths of the earth his ward finally emerged. The awakened apprentice discontentedly inquired why the mentor had woken him up so early. However, the ancient master ordered him to go to the academy and steal the true scriptures. The student considered it a meaningless activity, and would have preferred to go back to sleep. But the old man explained, the academy is home to a multitude of geniuses, and his ward suffered from a lack of suitable puppets for his dark arts. There will definitely be material there that can delight him. Having heard such enticing information, the student's spirits lifted. He thanked the mentor for the valuable information and promised as a reward to bring the true scriptures of Wudang. As soon as the ward withdrew, the elder plunged into gloomy memories. The head of the academy had exiled him 100 years ago, and he had never forgotten it. Sooner or later, the arrogant leader would regret his decision. At this time, the academy was preparing for the upcoming trials. Han Yiqian gathered her students to announce the upcoming academic competitions. The craft class will also send participants to the tournament. The students anxiously reminded that such trials require a demonstration of combat power, whereas their skills are focused on craft arts. They won't be able to compete worthily with true warriors. However, the wise mentor called on her protégés not to lose heart. When they enter enlightenment, they will be able to create powerful weapons for use in battle, which will help them succeed in the competitions. She decided to launch a special training program, which will be led by Yuwan himself. The Lord attempted to decline this appointment, not wanting to waste precious time in vain. However, unexpectedly, another student spoke out against it. A burly man named Gu Jianfeng. The powerful cultivator was surprised by the sight of this young man, as he had never met him before. The rest of the students joyfully surrounded their returned comrade, as they had not known his whereabouts for a long time and missed him. They hastened to share the news that many in the class had reached a state of enlightenment. It seemed that Gu Jianfeng also missed everyone. Now that he had settled his family problems, the young man had returned to complete his education. Ye Xuan, still not understanding anything, asked for clarification on what was happening. Han Yiqian explained. Gu Jianfeng was the former class crafts leader, and the only student to have achieved enlightenment at that time. After ascending to Dao, he took an academic leave for unknown reasons, so the mentor did not expect his return until today. Jing Dabao became worried. Since the guy had just objected to Ye Xuan's leadership, he must be plotting something. He did not wish to take on leadership responsibilities and was only glad of Gu Jianfeng's objections. At this moment, a massive young man stepped forward, addressing the mentor. He made it clear, in the opinion of the students, it's wrong when some freshman is in charge of special training. The woman was at a loss as to what the problem was. The others also did not understand Gu Jianfeng's objections. After all, it was under the guidance of Ye Xuan that they had achieved enlightenment without any difficulties. His comrades had too high an opinion of the hero. They were all already on the verge of enlightenment and would have entered the Dao even without Ye Xuan's intervention. In his opinion, the mysterious cultivator was simply appropriating the fruits of others' efforts, which originally belonged solely to the disciples themselves. For this reason, such a person did not deserve to lead special training. Gu Jianfeng considered himself the most suitable for this job. The Lord apparently had no response to such foolish words. Many still supported the hero. Although they were indeed close to enlightenment, Yeshuan had never tried to claim their merits. The only one who openly stood up for the master was Jing Dabao. He reminded that Gu Jianfeng was absent and knew nothing about what had happened. There was no need to come here just to slander his elder brother. However, the massive young man clearly did not like that someone dared to threaten him. He decided to teach the novice a lesson, and the opponents clashed in a duel. Unfortunately, Jing Dabao's strength was insufficient. He was blown away by the powerful attack. He was lucky that a comrade helped him to stay on his feet at the last second. Overcoming the pain, the fatty realized Gu Jianfeng definitely had an extraordinarily strong punch. He even thought he had hit metal, not a human hand. It was by no means a metaphor. Perhaps that's exactly how it was. After this, Gu Jianfeng decided to demonstrate the fruits of his efforts. He had replaced his entire right arm with a metallic limb. His Dao was the modernization of body parts. Many were frozen in amazement, thinking that this craft technique had long been lost. Even Jing Dabao, who had attained enlightenment, couldn't block the strike. Gu Jianfeng explained. In the past, their class of craftsmanship was constantly bullied due to its low combat power. But with the modernization of limbs, everything has changed. As body parts are modernized and strengthened through craftsmanship, combat power increases exponentially. That's why he returned, to bring the class to first place in the competition with the help of his technique. And many were not against trying this brilliant, though crazy, idea. The modification of the limbs is doomed to fail. It seemed that the master was aware of some secret truth, inaccessible to the others. The powerful cultivator explained the harsh truth. Although modernization is capable of granting colossal combat power for a brief moment, it inevitably causes irreversible damage to the cultivator themselves. Ultimately, such a path not only fails to promote progress in the Dao, but completely blocks it. However, Gu Jianfeng considered these words to be utter nonsense. He fiercely called on his comrades to ignore Yeshuan's ominous predictions, who allegedly envied him. In the opinion of the massive young man, the mysterious newcomer was afraid of losing his position as head of special training, so he fabricated false threats in order to sow panic among the students. The Lord explained patiently that from the very beginning he did not want a leading role. But Gu Jianfeng was convinced. The hero was just pretending, having no grounds for such serious accusations. Yishen was trying to convey. He simply didn't want inexperienced students to be misled by destructive illusions. Assured young man. How dare some freshman claim that his revolutionary ideas were just empty entertainment, unworthy of attention. The bickering stopped only when it was interrupted by Han Yikeng herself. The wise mentor reminded that the walls of the academy are not a place for disputes. She also emphasized that she had always been a craftsman, preferring to speak through deeds rather than words. As both students firmly held their own beliefs, the woman proposed to arrange a competition of 3 duels, so they could find out who was right, and the other students could choose their true Dao. Gu Jianfeng proposed to the Lord to create any weapon for a fair combat confrontation. Although Yeshuan agreed to the competition, he did not intend to participate personally. Instead of himself, the powerful cultivator decided to put forward his disciple, Jing Dabao. Many were shocked by this decision. How can you entrust the fate of the duel to a student who has only recently moved to the craft class and practically knows nothing? The frightened fat man tried to object. He didn't even know the basics of creating weapons. If he loses, he'll bring trouble to Yeshuan. Even Gu Jianfeng was burning with indignation. How dare Yeshuan send out a fighter who didn't even master the basics of the craft? It looked like blatant contempt for the opponent. However, instead of explanations, the master calmly led his protege away, further fueling Gu Jianfeng's desire to achieve a crushing victory. Soon they moved to the sacred workshop of the craft. The frightened Jing Dabao obviously did not understand what was required of him. However, Yeshuan calmly asked the young man to focus and calm his mind. The Lord intended to teach him the formations of ice and fire, as well as the methods of refining weapons. Having touched the student's head, the powerful cultivator applied the power of Lin's word. Many didn't believe that learning on the go was really possible. Even if Yeshuan has exceptional abilities, it doesn't mean he's capable of instantly teaching others. However, immediately after applying the mystical power, Jing Dabao understood absolutely everything. He immediately clasped his hands to form ice formation seals, after which he directed the acquired ability at the 3 blades lying before him. With his very first attempt, he managed to imbue the weapon with the power of the Dao. The metal could be seen to be frosting over, and hoarfrost began to form on it. Those who had not achieved enlightenment gaped in amazement, thinking it was some kind of cruel joke. For Ye Xuan was not only incredibly powerful himself, but also able to instantly teach others similar mastery. In fact, the master understood. If all the disciples were to follow someone like Gu Jianfen, their future would be irreparably ruined. That's why he had to intervene in order to prevent a catastrophe. For this reason, the powerful cultivator spoke out against the dangerous ideas, stating that the modernization of limbs is absolutely corrupt. After which he suggested checking how different their craftsmanship abilities are. Having seen the icy weapon created by Jing Dabao, Gu Jianfeng scornfully stated that he could destroy a similar blade with a single strike. Then the Lord asked to create 2 more weapons, with the attributes of fire and ice. The young man immediately set about forming the seals, and soon he had 2 blades with completely different properties. Ye Xuan promised. When the weapon that would fight on their side took its final form, the competition would begin. Gu Jianfeng was confident. Some primitive weapon created through the simplest formations of ice and fire would not be comparable to his iron fist. This Ye Xuan was too arrogant and self-assured. However, the master suggested verifying this in a fair fight. Right after these words, Jing Dabao attacked Gu Jianfen with his icy blade. As expected, from a single return strike, the weapon shattered into tiny fragments. It seemed the fat man had not expected such an outcome. Gu Jianfeng just sneered, understanding that with such a level of craftsmanship, Ye Xuan would definitely lose their competition. The other students realized that it was impossible to compare the two. After all, Jing Dabao had just mastered his craft and created a first-class weapon, while Gu Jianfen's metal arm was at least a third-class mastery. However, in this decisive second, the Lord instantly replaced the broken sword with a new one and asked Jing Dabao to continue. As promised, he will follow the instructions of his older brother. Despite his doubts, the chubby-cheeked boy's face filled with unwavering confidence. Grabbing the icy blade, he pounced on Gu Jianfeng with the same determination. The fighter was convinced, no matter how many attempts Jing Dabao made, the result would remain unchanged. The sword was broken with ease for the second time, and its owner flew back to where he came from. Gu Jianfeng proudly proclaimed, "His body represents the true royal Tao, which cannot be overcome using outdated craft methods." The other students already felt that Gu Jianfen's words were making sense. Maybe all the rules they had been following were indeed wrong. After all, Ye Xuan had already lost 2 out of 3 matches. There wasn't even a need for a final battle. Even Ankyo Yue was puzzled as to why the master in the competition didn't use at least a third-class or higher weapon. Now everything was heading for a complete failure. Although Han Yiqian herself didn't know his plan, she decided to trust their genius newcomer. At this moment, Jing Daba was apologizing to his mentor for creating such imperfect weaponry. The competition is not over yet. He is waiting for the final battle. Handing the final sword to the student, Ye Xuan filled the young man with greater confidence. He promised not to disgrace his older brother and with unwavering determination rushed into battle. It seemed that Gu Jianfeng intended to finally crush Ye Xuan's dignity with his last blow. However, to his greatest amazement, the metal hand suddenly froze from the effect of the icy force. He couldn't even properly flex his fingers due to the numbing cold. All that was left for him was to try to defend himself with his numb limb. But after the next blow, it shattered into countless fragments. The other students couldn't understand how the senior brother could be defeated with a single strike of a sword created by a novice. Even Jing Dabao himself did not clearly realize what he had done, and when he had become so powerful. Even the elderly woman did not understand why Gu Jianfeng's metal arm had suddenly become so vulnerable. Thermal expansion and cold compression had affected the metal structure. She was finally convinced that Ye Xuan was a true genius. At this moment, Gu Jianfeng began to accuse the master of an unfair victory, claiming that he had intentionally attacked with a weapon of a different attribute. True warriors are not afraid of cunning, and their confrontation was a competition of mastery. Moreover, the 3 first-class blades, which Jing Dabao spent less than 5 minutes perfecting, destroyed the third-class metal arm that he had worked hard on. Gu Jianfeng refused to accept the result. If he had known about the prepared trap, with one move he would have cut through all 3 weapons, not allowing the opponent to strike. Then the Lord decided to use the weapon created by his pupil. The attack whizzed past Gu Jianfen, and when he looked at the earth, he saw the terrifying power released by a simple blade. The rest frantically tried to understand how a first-level weapon could demonstrate such power. They decided that Ye Xuan was too powerful, and therefore did not use his own strength. It was the aura of the sword, created by the energy of the master himself. The powerful cultivator calmly reiterated the truth. The modernization of limbs is a path of unrestrained pursuit of brute power. Of course, the result is 3 times the usual weapon control. But what they truly strive for is the perfect harmony of man and blade, unity and the realization of the true Tao. That's why the Lord handed the flaming blade to the defeated warrior, hoping that he would finally grasp the essence of his teachings. However, Gu Jianfeng still didn't accept the lesson. Having cast aside his weapon, he fiercely declared that he would never deviate from his chosen path. His limb modification was the most powerful Tao in the craft. As he left, the stubborn one promised to show the Lord just how much he was mistaken about his true strength. Yexun understood. Such stubbornness can sometimes be even disastrous. Alas, Gu Jianfeng will not come to his senses until he sees his own coffin. At this moment, Han Yiqian finally announced the end of the test. Since there were no more objections, she proclaimed Ye Xuan as the head of special training. The Lord once again tried to decline the appointment. However, the wise mentor had boundless faith in him. In the end, the powerful cultivator had to take the position. After all, he had gotten himself into this trouble. Meanwhile, in a secluded place, Gu Jianfeng was still trying to calm down his burning anger. He swore to never admit defeat to Ye Xuan. The young man would develop his Tao of limb modification and would surely reclaim his place in the crafting class. At this moment, Lin Kun approached him, who had heard about Gu Jianfeng's return, but was puzzled as to why the guy was in such a deplorable state. When the defeated fighter thought that the haughty elder had come to mock him, the elder merely feigned offense at such an opinion. Lin Kun calmly explained, they have a common enemy with Gu Jianfeng, so he came to offer help in humiliating the arrogant guy. It's already obvious that in his current state, Gu Jianfeng won't be able to represent the craft class in the academic competitions. However, the combat class can give him a chance to get revenge on Ye Xuan in front of everyone. The price of the alliance was small. Just help Lin Kun win the academic competition. After he gets the true scriptures of Wu Dao, he will be able to help Gu Jianfeng become the head of the craft class. This sentence really interested the embittered young man. As a result, they concluded an agreement and decided to discuss a more specific plan for revenge. 3 days later, the students of the academy gathered in the square of the educational building. Everyone around was enthusiastically discussing what a great opportunity they had been given to participate in a grand competition. If someone managed to grasp the true scriptures of Wanda, they would be able to soar to the heavens. At this solemn moment, the head of the academy stepped forward, officially declaring the great competition open. After that, he handed out personal nameplates to all the students. The Lord got a plate with the number 66, a fairly favorable number it seemed. The leader explained the essence of the test, a 3-day battle for survival, where the winner is the one who collects the most tokens. It was also possible to opt out of the competition by crushing the token and returning it. Everyone understood. Under such conditions, the participants must not only fight each other for tokens, but also make sure that a defeated opponent does not crush his token. After this, the leader gave the order to the teachers under his command to open the gates of the secret territory. By combining their powers, the mentors created a mystical portal. The leader urged the students to start the ascent as soon as possible. From this moment on, the great competition began. Right there, soaring into the sky, everyone rushed into the shining portal. At the moment when the Lord soared into the sky, Aniclimax proposed that they unite. Jing Dabao also wanted to stay close to his mentor, so Ye Xuan suggested that everyone meet together upon arrival at the secret territory. When the portal closed, those who remained could only hope that this time someone worthy would obtain the true scriptures. Han Yiqian curiously inquired why the clan leader had decided to do such a thing. It turned out that over the past few decades, none of the academy's top students were able to achieve full enlightenment. The instructor was afraid that the reason lay in the insufficient qualifications of the students. However, the true problem was that the academy had voluntarily closed itself off to higher enlightenment. Therefore, this time the leader placed the scriptures directly on the secret territory, hoping that someone would still be able to comprehend them. However, the attendees unexpectedly sensed the ominous aura of demons. It seems that the spawn of darkness have guessed that the leader will place the true scriptures in a secret territory. As if nothing was out of the ordinary, they materialized right on the academy's territory. The young demon Shiyue was struck by the insight of the new generation of hellish fiends. Qing'er indeed possessed outstanding wisdom and foresight. Han Yiqian panicked, unable to understand how the demons had managed to break through the academy's great defensive barriers. The head immediately gave the order to the teachers to activate the defensive spells immediately, but it was too late. The tactics instructor suddenly attacked the leader, announcing that the Great Barrier had been destroyed long ago. Han Yiqian didn't have time to do anything before Qing'er approached her directly and delivered a crushing kick to the face, sending the woman backward. Until the very last moment, looking at the treacherous mentor, she did not understand why this degenerate had decided to betray them. But as it turned out, she was mistaken. He had never been devoted to the academy, since he was a half-demon from birth. At this moment, another dark creature named Yin Mu defeated the potion master and the combat class teacher. He suggested going to the secret territory, not wasting time on settling things here, as he couldn't find a suitable material to create a new shell anywhere. Zinera agreed and ordered half of the demons to guard the defeated, while the rest would enter the secret territory with her. Right then, Shiyue used demonic powers to break through the gates of the secret territory, and the detachment led by Tsinera rushed there. The bleeding headmaster understood that the academy had suffered a great misfortune, and did not know what to do. The events moved to the most secret territory of the academy. Finally, the students were able to arrive, scattered across the vast terrain. Yuwan immediately realized this place was vast enough. All the participants were randomly scattered throughout the territory. He needed a way to find Jing Dabao and Anqiu Yue for a reunion. However, he didn't even have time to take a step when a huge beast already took aim at him. The Lord was enraged by the impudence of this vile offspring. He instantly struck the white tiger in the face, causing it to collapse unconscious. The powerful cultivator decided not to kill the beast for now, leaving it for dinner. For white tigers are definitely tasty, and this one looked especially fatty and juicy. However, unfortunately, the tiger died instantly after hearing it. It was striking that the carcass dissolved in the air, turning into a small crystal. When the Lord touched it, he realized that technology was hidden inside. This one was specifically the fierce tiger fist. Yishin realized the peculiarity of this territory. All the beasts here were created from various fragments of the Tao's will. By killing them, one can obtain the corresponding share of mystical power. He had never thought that such a treasure could be located within the academy's territory. The Lord considered these techniques to be perfectly suitable for restoring the power of Lin's word, so instead of hunting other students, he targeted various small animals. Soon the powerful cultivator accumulated a multitude of Tao crystals. Thus he could restore most of his lost might. Aiming at the gathered stones, the Lord applied the power of absorption. In an instant, the bright hieroglyph on his forehead flashed, and the crystals, having lost energy, fell to the ground. After all this, his skills had finally recovered to 80% of their former strength. This meant that in this trial, no one could be his opponent. However, nearby he sensed a familiar aura. Having sensed something sinister, the Lord set off in that direction. At this time, in the open space, Zayao and Jing Dabao clashed fiercely with Gu Jianfeng. The rosy-haired beauty thought that Gu Jianfeng had finally lost his mind, and reminded him he was a student of the craft class and shouldn't be fighting against his comrades. This time he came as a representative of the combat class. This revelation struck the disciples like a thunderbolt. Soon behind the traitor's back, Lin Kun himself materialized, maliciously explaining the reasons for such an unexpected alliance. Gu Jianfeng had switched to their side because they were all fed up with the arrogant upstart Yuwan. The pink-haired beauty burned with righteous anger, promising to definitely report their vile deed to the mentor as soon as she left this cursed place. Something like this would never happen. Throwing a strange flag at An Chuyi's feet, he activated the mystical power embedded in it. At the same moment, a blood-red aura danced around their opponents, forming an impenetrable barrier. It was an artifact he had obtained during his travels, one capable of sealing a portion of space for a short time. The teleportation effect through the token became completely useless. When Jing Dabao looked at his token, he realized that Gu Jianfeng was not lying. The teleportation ability was indeed suppressed by the cursed barrier. Lin Kun nodded gratefully to his ally for such an excellent technique. Then his gaze stopped at Anqiu Yue with an openly lustful expression. Although the girl often rebelled against him, her body and face possessed truly refined beauty. The pink-haired beauty immediately understood what vile thoughts were tormenting Lin Kun's mind. Realizing the impending danger, Jing Dabao begged his friend to run as fast as she could. She had to get out of this accursed barrier at all costs. He promised to hold off their opponents until she gained her freedom. However, Gu Jianfeng immediately launched a fierce attack on the fat man with all his might, making it clear that no one would leave this place alive. And Zayua desperately rushed to help her comrade. But her path was blocked by Lin Kun himself, who chose the girl as his opponent. With the first blow, Jing Dabao received a crushing blow right to the face. He saw deadly intentions in the eyes of the enemy. He wasn't going to spare him. But at this fateful moment, everything around was bathed in a divine golden glow. Entering the battle in place of his disciple, it was Yuwan himself who appeared. The master realized the lessons taught to Gu Jianfeng last time were insufficient. Since the mule was sinking deeper into the wrong path, it was time to correct his delusions with force. Literally from one light touch, the metal hand began to cover with cracks. The next finger tap, and it shattered into countless shards. Gu Jianfeng flew away like a broken puppet. When he came to, he realized with horror that Ye Xuan had completely destroyed his dantian. This vital area in a cultivator's body was irreparably destroyed. He who betrayed his class deserved such a fate. Now it was Lin Kun's turn. Since Ye Xuan had entered the academy, this arrogant youngster had bothered him several times. Today was the time to put an end to their long-standing feud. The arrogant prefect merely sneered, making it clear he was definitely not an equal to some pitiful wretch like Gu Jianfeng. An emerald aura of power danced around him, and he recalled he was the leader of the strongest class in the academy. No discard from the despised craft class could compare to him. However, the Lord did not let him finish speaking. Rapidly approaching, he dealt a stunning slap. That blow was enough to send the guy flying several meters back, losing consciousness. Ye Xuan struck him again, awarding him with a second blow and sarcastically reminding him of his pathetic words about being the strongest class. The Lord was clearly annoyed that this insignificant vegetable was so self-assured, considering itself untouchable. With just a couple of blows, the haughty youngster was completely defeated and humiliated. The Lord calmly approached his fallen body, determined to find out who was truly strong now. Unfortunately, he was so beaten that he no longer understood what was happening. Therefore, before passing the final verdict, the powerful cultivator turned to Anchai. What would be the best course of action to take with the scoundrel who dared to humiliate her? Meanwhile, in a remote part of the territory, a group of demons was conducting an ominous ritual. The spawn of darkness understood. The perfect time has come to lift the ancient seals. Each of the minions prepared their own artifact: a dragon's maiden blood, a devil's bone, and a human soul. After that, they all began to read out the accursed incantations. At last, a bright purple haze began to burst out of the mystical circles. It was obvious. If one waited a bit longer, this great formation would be able to devour the true scripture of Wanda itself. At this time, Lin Kun was already on his knees, humbly apologizing to Anchaye for all the sins he had committed. He explained that it was all Gu Jianfen's idea, so he begged for mercy. The haughty young man also reminded the girl. They were classmates from the same academy, asking her not to punish him too severely. In fact, Lin Kun understood the psychology of the pink-haired beauty. She had always been soft-hearted and would inevitably let him off if he begged for leniency convincingly enough. And Chayu really understood. Formerly they were classmates. Having heard this, Lin Kun was already triumphant, deciding that the girl had given in to his feigned pleas. Jing Dabao only hoped that his sister would never forgive such a scoundrel. However, in the next second, the girl made an unexpected request to the Lord. Seeing Lin Kun kneeling pitifully, who was their classmate, she asked Ye Xuan to give him a truly enjoyable experience. No one expected such bloodthirsty words from the kind-hearted girl. And Kyuya calmly reminded Lin Kun, who thought she was cute and naive. Her behavior was indeed based on the fact that they were classmates. But as soon as he raised his hand against his comrades, their relationship ended forever. And to enemies, she never showed mercy. The Lord understood. The little sister was absolutely right, and he condoled with Lin Kun, who had come to his senses too late about his actions. The guy started desperately begging for mercy, pleading not to kill him, as he still had a long life ahead of him. He did not want to die. The decision was made too late, but the scoundrel was lucky. At this very second, the Lord felt something horrifying happening to space itself. The land between them began to be covered with ominous cracks. Everyone turned to the Lord, wanting to understand. What is happening to the territory? Has an earthquake begun? The legendary book itself began to emerge from the fissures in the earth. She radiated an aura all too painfully familiar to the Lord. Everyone noticed the glowing artifact hovering over the mysterious territory. One of the erudite students of the academy recognized this phenomenon. This is exactly how the true scripture of Wandao manifests itself. No one expected it to actually end up in a secret territory. They had heard rumors that the head could have put it here, but they did not believe such a thing. Lin Kun was over the moon. This was the turning point. He darted forward, intending to seize the true scripture. For once he got it, he would be able to dominate the entire academy. The others panicked. If someone like Lin Kun gets hold of the sacred artifact, everyone will be in trouble. The book would not fall into his hands. The Lord was well aware of the true nature of this artifact. At the moment when Lin Kun stretched out his hands to the sacred book. But then out of nowhere, Tsingera appeared to stop him. She instantly attacked the boy, inflicting serious injuries on his body. It was only then that everyone finally realized. Devil cult adepts had interfered with the academic competitions. Lin Kun was about to engage in battle until he saw how many powerful demons surrounded them. That's why he began to humbly beg for mercy, offering to surrender and leave peacefully. However, Shiyue clearly did not want to bother with this insignificant opponent. With a crushing blow, he slammed the guy's body into the ground, warning, "Demons spare no one." Having crashed into the solid ground, Lin Kun realized his final defeat. Some of the students were well aware of the cult's adepts of the devil and demons, so they wanted to run away, saving their own lives. However, Qinger had no intention of letting them escape easily. By applying the barrier technique, she deprived the tokens of their ability to teleport. Then Yinmu inquired of the leader what would be the best course of action. She perfectly understood. These students could be used as victims to desecrate and weaken the power of the true scripture. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to take it with them. The demon liked this idea, which he decided to implement immediately. With the demonic palm technique, he launched a crushing attack on the defenseless students. Seeing the approach of the deadly machinery, everyone understood. They wouldn't be able to stop it. This force would most likely crush them in the next instant. A colossal explosion occurred on the ground. Shui was already proud of himself, thinking that he had managed to deal with all his opponents so quickly. The unscathed master stood among the students he had protected. With his own strength, he repelled the devastating attack, striking everyone with his incredible power. The powerful cultivator calmly explained the obvious truth. The true scripture would never have appeared on its own. Its sudden materialization meant only one thing. A catastrophic event had occurred in the territory. Therefore, a traitor was hiding among them. The tactics teacher retorted disdainfully, "This kid was just a rookie. He may have acquired some secret knowledge, but he is clearly not going to be that legendary hero who will save everyone from inevitable doom." Upon hearing such words, Yeshuan merely sneered. He explained that he wasn't a fan of fantasy stories at all. They seemed too boring and predictable to him. After which the Lord decided to calmly demonstrate how traitors are usually treated. To the general Hordemon's body began to literally suffocate in a golden haze of divine power. In an instant, it broke into the tiniest particles, scattered by the wind. It was only after this that Sinkara and the other spawn of darkness realized just how monstrously powerful this mysterious young man was. The demoness sent Yin Mu and Shu Yue to restrain the Lord while she took control of the true scripture. The spawns of darkness pounced on Yeshuan, trying to shackle him with mystical chains. At first glance, it seemed that they had managed to drive the enemy into a hopeless situation. However, the powerful cultivator understood that such a trap was not capable of restraining him. Meanwhile, Singer panicked, because they didn't have time to prepare the sacrifice. That's why she decided to use her own blood. Biting her tongue, the demoness spat the crimson liquid onto the sacred book. After that, she began to recite the great technique of the demonic mind, Sea of Blood. The spawn of darkness rejoiced, realizing, just a little more time and the power of the true scriptures would be fully at its command. She no longer had time for that. The frightened demoness only wanted to know how he had managed to get here so quickly. But the Lord merely pointed to those guys she had sent him to restrain. They were stuck in a cage of their own making. Sinera proposed to Ye Xuan to play with her, but at this moment the book shone brightly with a blood-red light. The demoness was delighted. Her desecration had worked. Now the true scripture was under her control, which meant only one thing. She would now annihilate the annoying hero with one stroke. The assistants rejoiced that Zinera had managed to do such a grand job. Now with the true scripture in hand, even Ye Xuan won't be able to compare to her. Even Yinmu understood. The power contained in this book was so colossal that even against a person with the highest abilities, it would not lose. The disciples, on the other hand, were in a panic, realizing, now that the evil demons had taken control of the true scripture, even if Yeshuan was powerful, he wouldn't be able to stop them. It was completely useless. The demoness, raising the book high into the sky, applied the technique of release of the will of the true writing Tao. At the same moment, a deadly force struck the Lord. It seemed that the force was ready to engulf him completely. Tsinyera was triumphant, intoxicating herself with the power she had acquired. Now at her command, no matter how powerful Yeshuan was, he would be torn to pieces by this power that surpassed all imagination. However, the Lord merely laughed at her desire to destroy him with a similar force. The demoness was certain, in this way she would flay him, pull out his tendons, extract his soul and torment him for tens of thousands of years. However, she was ready to spare him if he started begging for mercy right now. Her demonic allies asked Sank to not waste time and kill the guy immediately. She had already played enough with the victim anyway. However, the girl only got angry that such losers dared to give her orders. After that, she attacked the dungeon where her own assistants had been languishing all this time. Everyone was shocked by the woman who even killed her own people. Since these two evil demons couldn't even block one of her moves, they understood just how strong she really was. Yeshuen realized the truth. The will of Tao contained in the true scriptures was too powerful for this demoness. Therefore, she was in a state of confusion bordering on madness. Now the spawn of darkness was gathering to attack him for final destruction. Frightened, Yue and Jing Dabao begged Yeshuan to run as fast as they could. However, at this moment, deadly attacks were already heading in his direction. The Lord, however, smiled calmly, understanding that although such powers might be terrifying to others, for him they were the best tonic. After that, he applied the breath of absorption technique, with the technique of drawing in all the attacks directed against him. Even the demoness had never heard that something like this was possible. Thanks to her attacking the Lord, the power of Lin's words finally fully returned to him. Chinyera looked at the book in her hands in fright, which was supposed to give her the power to destroy any opponent. However, the Lord summoned the book to himself with a single simple gesture. Slipping out of the demoness's hands, the sacred artifact ended up right in his palms. Yeshuan attacked the girl with just one finger, and it was instantly incinerated, just as its allies had recently been destroyed. Now the affairs of the powerful cultivator in this territory were fully completed, and he could return home. 3 days later, the events moved back within the walls of the Wudao Academy. As expected, the book belonged to Yeshuan, but he did not expect the founder to decide to keep his draft from those bygone days. Now it was time for the Lord to leave this realm. He did not know how the leader would take his departure, but the next goal was to restore the power of the word of Bin. The powerful cultivator had not yet decided where to go. At this moment, the head of the academy rushed up to him, having received a distress signal from the founder himself. Yishuanyu became curious about where exactly the founder had sent out the call for help, and it turned out that the signal came from the intersection of this world and the world of spirits. Without saying a word, the Lord set off in that very direction. He still had to work on restoring the next word. It was an excellent opportunity to help an old friend and continue his own path to absolute power.